I don't remember the first strange thing that happened. What I remember is the feeling, the way the hair on my arm stood up as we pulled away from that last campsite in the Smokies. Not because of anything I saw, not because of some jump scare or dramatic moment. It was something quieter than that, colder, like the silence in the forest had changed frequencies and no one else noticed. It was late April when we drove out. Spring hadn't fully arrived in the upper ridges of Tennessee, and most of the higher trails were still damp with melt and fog. The snow had receded, but the cold clung to the trees, and the clouds dragged their shadows over the peaks like they were looking for something. We'd been camping out there for 4 nights. Me, my wife Melanie, and our shepherd mix, Dusty. We'd wanted time away, off the grid, no cell reception, no emails, just the 3 of us and the woods. Our 22-foot Winnebago had taken us through Sedona, the Mojave, northern Utah, but this trip felt different before it even began. Smoky Mountain Country is a place thick with ghosts, and I don't mean that in a touristy way. I mean there's something in the land that doesn't let go. We stayed at a primitive site off a little-known fire road near Tremont. Nothing fancy, no power hookups, no other campers nearby, just a level pull-off nestled beneath a copse of old hemlocks and red spruce. I picked it because I wanted solitude. I wanted to forget the office, the apartment back in Louisville, and especially the voicemail my brother left that I still hadn't listened to. The first 3 nights were quiet, more or less. Damp, a little eerie, but manageable. Melanie and I did what most couples do. We cooked on the Coleman, played cards, hiked a few trails. Dusty chased squirrels like it was his calling. But the 4th night, something shifted. Melanie heard it first, a low dragging sound like something heavy brushing against the side of the RV. She shook me awake around 2 a.m., whispering my name. "Listen," she said, eyes wide in the dark. "Do you hear that?" At first I didn't, just the creak of the trees swaying in the wind. But then, there it was again, a faint shuffling, not footsteps, slower, softer, like someone dragging a branch or a foot across the gravel. I flicked on the outside lights, nothing, just fog and trees and the uneven ground sloping into the forest. We told ourselves it was a raccoon, maybe a bear rooting around, nothing to panic over. Still, I slept with the axe next to the bed that night, blade under my side of the mattress. We left early the next morning. Melanie didn't say much during the drive out, just sat in the passenger seat with her legs crossed and her eyes on the tree line, like something out there was watching us leave. We didn't talk about the sound. I think we both wanted to forget it. It was only once we got back on the main road, back into civilization, back into signal, that things got worse. We parked at a KOA near Cherokee to clean out the gray tank and grab a shower. I took Dusty out for a quick walk while Melanie freshened up. When I came back to the RV, something was off. The door was locked. I never lock the RV when one of us is inside. It's an unspoken thing between us, just one of those shared habits married couples build over time. I knocked once, no answer. Knocked again, louder. Still nothing. I called out her name, then circled around to the rear window. She wasn't inside. The lights were off. Shower bag still gone. Her coat still missing from the hook by the door. But the door was locked from the inside. I stood there with my hand on the frame, pulse creeping up into my throat. It was a small RV. No slide-outs, no attic loft, nowhere to hide. Still, something was in there. I called her phone. It rang once, then cut off. She came walking back 10 minutes later with wet hair and a grocery bag, smiling, totally normal. She hadn't been back to the RV yet, she said. I didn't tell her about the locked door, not then, not yet. I told myself maybe I imagined it. Maybe I just panicked. We hit the road again an hour later. The plan was to drive through Maggie Valley, cut across Pisgah, and find a quiet spot for the night near Looking Glass Falls. I didn't want to go far. I just wanted to put a little more distance between us and that campsite off Tremont. It was around dusk when the temperature dropped. I mean, really dropped. 1 minute the dash read 54, the next it dropped to 37 in less than a mile. The windshield fogged. The heater kicked on. I remember glancing at Melanie and seeing her arms pulled tight across her chest like she was holding something in. Dusty growled, low, guttural, like he didn't recognize the air anymore. Melanie said something that chilled me more than the temperature ever could. Don't stop. What? Just don't stop the RV. Not yet. She said it without looking at me, eyes fixed on the fog curling over the 2-lane road ahead of us. I gripped the wheel tighter and kept going. When we pulled off that night, somewhere off Forest Service Road 475, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong inside the RV. Not outside. Inside. Like the air was heavier. More humid almost. Like breath on glass. And the smell, faint but distinct. Wet wood, soil, rot. Melanie lit a candle and made soup. Dusty wouldn't leave the driver's seat. He just sat there, ears low, watching the dark through the windshield. It was almost midnight when I opened the overhead cabinet to grab an extra blanket and found the photograph. We don't keep photos in that cabinet. But there it was. Folded once, slid neatly between a flashlight and our deck of cards. It was a printed Polaroid. Grainy, black and white, looked like it had been taken with an old camera. No timestamp, no writing. It showed a forest. The exact bend in the trail where Melanie and I had stopped to rest our first morning in the Smokies. And in the bottom left corner, barely visible in the trees, was the outline of a man. Or at least, something shaped like one. Tall. Thin. Wrong. I didn't show Melanie the photo. I burned it in the sink while she slept. And I didn't sleep at all that night. Not because I was afraid of something coming in, but because, deep in my gut, I knew something had never left. Something had gotten in, and it hadn't gotten out. That next morning, the sun looked wrong. Not the kind of wrong you can explain. Not cloudy, not stormy, not eclipsed. Just muted. Like the light was coming through old glass, tinted with a faint yellow film that made the trees outside look sick. Even the birds seemed hesitant. I didn't hear a single song. Just wind brushing through dry needles and the occasional snap of something in the underbrush. Melanie was quiet while she made coffee, but her hands trembled slightly as she poured. She didn't mention the night before. Neither did I. There was a space between us that hadn't been there when we first pulled into the Smokies. Not coldness exactly, but something careful. Like we were both trying to pretend things were normal, while each carrying our own private weight. I kept telling myself I was imagining it all. The photo, the locked door, the strange drop in temperature. These things had to have reasonable explanations. Right? We left the forest road around 10 and drove through Brevard. The plan was to grab supplies and keep moving west. Asheville, maybe, somewhere with people, signal, noise, but we never made it that far. Dusty started acting strange again, not just nervous this time, agitated, growling low in his throat at the rear of the RV, whining when we hit curves like something behind us was shifting its weight. He kept staring down the hallway toward the bathroom like he was tracking something neither of us could see. That was the first time I opened the RV's access hatch. It's a little utility panel under the rear bed, a space for storing hoses, tools, maybe a spare fuse or two. I'd checked it dozens of times before, but this time, when I popped the latch and lifted the hatch, a rush of air hit me in the face. Cold, damp, like the inside of a cave. And there, wedged between the insulation and the wall panel, was a small ball of cloth. I pulled it out and unwrapped it slowly. Inside were two things: a child's sock, soaked and crusted like it had been buried for years, and a torn strip of paper with handwriting scrawled in what looked like red pencil. You shouldn't have looked. My stomach turned. My hands went cold. I tossed the sock out the window and shoved the paper deep into the trash, then double-bagged it and dropped it in a gas station dumpster outside of town. Melanie asked what I was doing, and I just said, old food. Didn't want it to smell up the cabin. She didn't press. That's when I should have turned back. But I didn't. I told myself I was being dramatic, that the photo had somehow gotten left behind by the last owner, that the sock was random garbage picked up from somewhere along the road. Coincidences. Just coincidences. But fear has a smell, a texture. It clings to your thoughts, reshapes your instincts. And that night, outside of Silva, North Carolina, I finally stopped pretending I was imagining it. We parked in a small wooded lot off a gravel road, nothing marked, just a little rest area tucked between a creek and a ridge. Other campers had left signs of stopping there, ashes from a fire pit, some tire ruts, but no one else was there that night. We didn't want to pay for another hookup. We just needed rest. Melanie fell asleep early. I sat up with a headlamp and a notebook, trying to journal the events of the last few days. I needed to process, to make it make sense. But halfway through writing the sentence, maybe we brought something back with us, I heard the first knock. It wasn't loud. 3 soft taps, like a child's knuckles brushing the side paneling of the RV. I turned off the lamp, waited. Then 3 more knocks. This time on the rear door, same rhythm. Slow, deliberate. Dusty whimpered, pressed himself against my leg, trembling. I grabbed the axe and stood by the back window, careful not to move the blinds. The night outside was still, no wind, no movement, just black trees and shadows stretched too long under a cloud-thick moon. The knocking stopped. I waited. 5 minutes. 10. Nothing. I was about to climb into bed when I noticed something in the bathroom mirror. We have one of those fog-resistant mirrors mounted on the wall by the shower. A small thing, scratched from years on the road, but functional. And in the corner of the mirror was a fingerprint. Not a smudge, not a streak from the sink. A single clear fingerprint, pressed from the inside, as though someone had touched the reflective surface from within the mirror itself. I backed away slowly. I didn't wake Melanie. I wanted to. God, I wanted to tell her everything. But I couldn't. Something in me believed that saying it out loud would give it power. That if I voiced it, if I gave it a name, it would become real in a way I wasn't ready for. I barely slept. At some point in the early morning, I must have dozed off in the passenger seat with the axe still in my lap. I dreamed of fog rolling through the trees and someone standing just outside the window, face pressed close, mouth moving but making no sound. When I woke, the axe was gone. I searched every inch of the RV. Nothing. No signs of break-in. No prints. Nothing missing. Except the axe. Melanie noticed, but I brushed it off. I probably left it outside, I said. Maybe someone picked it up. We left that spot by mid-morning, both of us on edge. The day was warm again, unnaturally so. Dusty didn't eat. Melanie didn't speak for nearly an hour. Then, just outside of Bryson City, I noticed something that stopped my breath. I was driving, hand on the wheel, staring ahead, and in the rearview mirror, behind the little curtain that separates the cab from the cabin, I saw a silhouette. It was gone, in a blink. But for a heartbeat, there had been someone standing in the middle of our RV. No movement, no sound, just standing, watching. I didn't tell Melanie, I didn't pull over. I just kept driving. Because some part of me, deep and terrified, knew the truth. We had left the Smoky Mountains, but something hadn't left us. That night, we parked in a small KOA outside of Tellico Plains. Civilization again. Campers. Lights. People. I figured the proximity to others would help me calm down, maybe even sleep. You tell yourself the danger can't follow you into the light. That evil's allergic to laughter, to campfires, to the sound of kids riding bikes past your RV. But that's just another lie we tell ourselves, because whatever followed us out of the Smokies, it didn't care who was nearby. It didn't care about our bright little campsite, or the fact that we were 2 rows away from a couple of retired teachers from Ohio playing cribbage under a lantern. It came anyway. The first thing I noticed was the condensation on the bedroom window. Not fog from inside. It was on the outside. And there, just as the light from a nearby trailer flickered through the trees, I saw it. Smudged shapes on the glass. Tiny handprints. No more than 4 inches wide. Dozens of them. Like children had been pressing their fingers all over the window in the middle of the night. Melanie didn't see them. I wiped them away before she came back from the shower building. But the worst part? When I wiped one of the prints off, the glass breathed back at me. A single fogged-up oval appeared on the inside of the window, like something exhaled against the glass from within the wall. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat there in the dark, Dusty curled up in a tight knot beneath my legs, trembling like a leaf. I held the old hunting knife I kept from my dad. I hadn't used it in years. It was dull and rusty and probably couldn't cut through cardboard, but I held it anyway. It made me feel like I still had some control. At around 3:47 a.m., I remember because I was watching the microwave clock. The lights in the RV dimmed for 3 seconds. Not off, just dim, like something sucked the power out of the walls and let it return slowly, like a breath held too long. And from the back of the RV came a sound I can't forget, a dragging, slow, methodical, like something heavy being pulled across linoleum. But I knew every inch of that RV. Nothing was loose back there. There was nothing that should make that noise. I sat frozen in the front seat, knife in one hand, flashlight in the other, but I couldn't bring myself to go look. I couldn't even move. All I could do was listen. And then came the whisper. Soft, childlike, coming from the bathroom door. Let me in. I nearly dropped the flashlight. It wasn't a demand. It wasn't a threat. It was a request. Polite. Patient. Let me in. I didn't answer. Didn't breathe. Dusty began to whimper again. And that whisper, God help me, laughed. Not loud, not maniacal. Just a short, breathy exhale like a kid trying to stifle a giggle in church. The bathroom door creaked open. I didn't move. I couldn't. I just stared down the narrow hall, waiting for something, anything, to step out. But nothing did. The whispering stopped. The air grew still. And after about 5 minutes of silence, I stood. I moved 1 inch at a time toward the bathroom. The door was half open, swaying slightly from side to side, like it was caught in a draft. Inside, nothing. No child, no sound, just the cold, heavy air again. Thicker now, more wet, like standing in a damp cave. But carved into the mirror with something sharp, something that had gouged through the silver backing, were 4 words. You already said yes. I woke Melanie at dawn, told her we needed to move again. She didn't ask questions. I think she was too tired, or maybe too afraid to know the answers. We drove west through the Cherokee National Forest toward Tennessee. Our original plan had been to loop around the southeast, see the Blue Ridge Parkway, maybe swing down toward Georgia. But now I didn't care where we went as long as it was far away from those damn mountains. But here's the thing. No matter how far we drove, it felt like we weren't moving at all. Like the road behind us folded back into the one ahead, like we were inside a maze and didn't know it yet. The GPS glitched constantly, said we were off-road when we weren't, showed turns where there were none. One time, it just spun our little blue RV in circles on the map, like it was caught in a drain. I pulled over at a diner in Etowah, desperate for a coffee and a normal human interaction. That's when I saw the flyer, taped to the window, yellowed from sun and smoke. A missing persons notice, a man and his wife, 40-something. RV travelers, disappeared near the Smoky Mountains. But it wasn't their faces that made my blood run cold. It was the RV in the picture. Same model, same year, same dent above the headlight. Ours. I leaned in closer, heart pounding. The photo was dated 2006, 19 years ago. I staggered back, unsure what I was even looking at. My RV hadn't existed in 2006. I bought it used 2 years ago, or thought I did. But the more I looked, the more I started to doubt every part of this trip. Where did we even get it? I couldn't remember the seller's name, couldn't remember the lot. There were papers somewhere, but right then they felt fake, flimsy, like something dreamed up by a child playing make-believe. I showed Melanie the flyer. She stared at it too long, lips trembling, eyes wide. Then she said the one thing I'd been too afraid to say out loud, "This isn't our RV." Melanie didn't cry. That was the scariest part. She just stood there, staring at that faded flyer through the diner window, her arms limp at her sides, like something inside her had unlatched and spilled out onto the concrete. I put a hand on her shoulder and she flinched, hard, like I was someone else for a moment, like she didn't know me. We got back in the RV. We didn't speak for a long time. The radio was off. Dusty lay curled by the bathroom door again, not sleeping. just watching it like it might open on its own. Eventually, Melanie whispered, "Do you remember the seller's name?" I didn't. I wanted to. I told myself I'd find the paperwork in the glove box and we'd call the dealership or the guy from Craigslist or whoever it had been. But my hands didn't move because somewhere inside me I already knew there was never a seller. Not in the way I thought. Something had given us the RV. And we'd said yes, even if we didn't know we had. That afternoon, we pulled into a campground outside of Chattanooga. We needed to be near other people. We needed the illusion of safety, even if we knew by now it wasn't real. The place was busy. Summer weekend crowd, kids yelling on bikes, dogs barking, grills sizzling. I tried to use the noise like armor, but something in the way people looked at us, the way they looked at the RV, told me we didn't belong anymore. An older man with a flannel shirt and a face like cracked leather walked by while I was hooking up the water line. He gave me a nod that wasn't quite friendly. "You sure you're from here?" he asked, voice low. I blinked. "What do you mean?" He didn't answer, just gave that same look people give when a wild animal wanders too close to their home. Not scared, not angry, just aware. Later that evening, Melanie asked me a question I hadn't considered. What if this thing doesn't want to hurt us? I stared at her. What? She was sitting on the fold-out bench, arms wrapped around herself. What if it just needs us? What if that couple, the ones in the flyer, they left it, and it's been waiting ever since? I couldn't believe what I was hearing, but the longer I sat with the thought, the more it made a sick kind of sense. The bathroom door hadn't slammed. It creaked open. The voice hadn't screamed. It had whispered, giggled. The handprints weren't claw marks. They were childlike. Melanie said, "Maybe it's not trying to scare us. Maybe it's trying to stay with us." "But why?" I asked. And then she looked at me with eyes I didn't recognize, eyes that didn't blink. What if we're all it has? I stood up. My chest felt too small, like someone was tightening a belt inside it. "No," I said, "no, we're not doing this. This is ours. Our life. Our trip. Our memories." I grabbed the keys. Melanie didn't protest. She just watched as I started the RV and pulled away from the campground, trees slapping at the sides as we rattled back onto the road. I didn't care where we went anymore. I just needed to drive, to feel like I still had control. But the GPS glitched again, only this time, instead of spinning or freezing, it displayed a single word across the map. Home. Melanie's breath caught. I turned it off. Dusty barked. Just once. A sharp, panicked sound. I glanced back and saw the bathroom door swing open by itself. Inside, the mirror had fogged up. A message appeared, written as if by an invisible finger. "Still yours." I slammed the brakes. We were on a rural road somewhere north of Saudi Daisy. No lights, no cars, no people for miles. "Out," I said. "What?" I turned to Melanie, gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles cracked. "We're not staying in this thing another night." She nodded slowly. Not afraid. Almost relieved. We grabbed what we could, wallets, phones, dusty, and started walking. Left the RV right there in the ditch, blinkers on. We walked for over 2 hours. No signal, no cars, just woods. And as the sun set behind us, I turned around one last time, and there it was. The RV, parked perfectly parallel on the roadside shoulder, like it had been waiting for us to turn around. Melanie whispered, "We didn't drive back." "I know," I said, and then the engine turned on, all by itself. The headlights flared to life, and in the driver's seat, just for a moment, I saw someone sitting there. Someone with my face, but older, hollow, like I'd been drained of everything but bone and shadow. I turned and ran. We didn't stop until we reached a gas station near a highway overpass. The clerk looked at us like we'd crawled out of a drainage ditch. Filthy, shaking, clutching our dog like he was the only thing keeping us tethered. We told the police our RV had been stolen. They looked, of course, but when they pulled footage from the diner in Etowah, they said no flyer had ever been taped to the window. They couldn't find any record of the couple we saw. And when they went to where we'd left the RV, there was nothing there, just fresh tire marks that ended in the ground. A week passed, then 2. We stayed in motels, cheap ones, the kind with flickering lights and stains in the carpet and mirrors you didn't dare look too long into. Every time we closed the door behind us, I pushed a chair under the knob. Every night, I checked the windows twice. Melanie stopped asking me to sleep. She already knew I wouldn't. Dusty stopped barking altogether. He stayed pressed against Melanie's leg, silent, eyes on the corners of every room like he was waiting for something to come out of them. And every morning, just before sunrise, we'd hear it. The distant hum of a diesel engine. Faint, like a whisper between walls. Never long. Just enough to make my heart seize in my chest and my fingers reach instinctively for keys that weren't there anymore. We tried to tell ourselves it was trauma, residual paranoia, but that didn't explain the smell. Every few nights, the motel room would reek of mildew and old carpet glue, just like the RV had when we first got it. That sickly scent of long-decayed plastic and heat-cooked rubber. Melanie kept a journal. She'd always written when she was anxious. Now her entries were more frantic, like she was trying to write reality into place before it slipped away again. One morning, I read a line she'd scrawled in the margin of a page. It doesn't want to hurt us, it wants us to remember it. And then, the more we forget, the closer it gets. That night, we checked into a roadside inn in Kentucky. There was a family parked beside us. A couple with 2 kids in a brand new RV, shiny and untouched. We watched them set up their awning, heard the laughter through the open window. It should have comforted me, but it didn't, because when the little girl rode past our room on her scooter, she stopped suddenly and looked at our door, just stood there and said, "Your other camper is waiting." We didn't sleep. At 3:14 a.m., Melanie woke up gasping. "It was in my dream," she said, clutching her chest. It was parked outside the window, but the sky was all wrong. Too many stars. Too low. I looked outside. The parking lot was empty, but tire tracks, deep, wide, ran straight across the gravel, stopping just short of our room. There was no vehicle, no sound, just the smell of damp plastic and the soft creak of a door swinging closed somewhere in the dark. That was when I knew. We hadn't escaped it. It had let us go. Just long enough for us to miss it. I didn't want to believe that. But as the days passed, as we moved farther north, the signs followed. Motel rooms with broken mirrors. Radio stations cutting out mid-song, replaced by static that pulsed like breath. Dogs that growled when we passed. Strangers who stared too long. It wasn't chasing us. It was circling, waiting, testing. I started having dreams too. In them, the RV wasn't haunted. It wasn't cursed. It was lonely. It wanted to be filled with memories, voices, lives. It wanted to belong to someone again, like a dog left behind too many times, like a house that refused to be empty. But every time I walked through its door in those dreams, I wasn't me. I was older, tired. My face was gray with mold. My fingernails yellow. My eyes were blank. And behind me in the bathroom, the door always creaked open. One day, Melanie handed me a set of keys. I blinked. "Where did you get these?" She didn't answer. She didn't have to. It was our keys, the same worn keychain, the same tag from that Smoky Mountain dealer. I knew it down to the scratch by the ignition notch. I never saw her take them. She just whispered, "I think we left it too fast. We didn't finish something." What? The story, the trip, the part where we were supposed to go all the way. I stared at her like she was speaking a language I didn't understand, because I didn't. Not then, but some part of me, the part that still remembered how the door handle felt when I grabbed it, the part that still heard that whisper from behind the mirror, believed her. That night, I searched for it. I don't know what I was hoping to find. A Craigslist listing, a dealer selling it under a different name, but I found something else, a forum thread from 2007. Topic title, "Have you ever had an RV you couldn't get rid of?" The posts were scattered, deleted, archived, but some pieces remained. Stories from people across the country, all different. But they shared the same details. A used RV, always a different make or model. A seller who couldn't be traced. Strange things after purchase. Sounds, smells, rooms changing shape. A growing attachment they couldn't explain. One comment chilled me to the bone. It doesn't want to scare you, it wants to be remembered. That's why it follows, that's why it always comes back. Another. You don't drive it, it drives you. I don't know what made me do it. Maybe it was Melanie's silence. Maybe it was the way Dusty had started to whimper when we passed gas stations, like he expected to be loaded back into the RV and driven somewhere awful. Maybe it was just that same gnawing curiosity that made us buy the damn thing in the first place. But I went looking for it, not online, not through paperwork. I drove. At first, aimlessly. Tennessee to Kentucky, then back down toward North Carolina, retracing the ghost of our old route. Melanie didn't say much, but she didn't try to stop me either. For a while, we stayed in motels off empty highways, ones that had been refurbished but still carried the bones of another time. Rotary phones bolted to the walls, bathroom tiles with hairline cracks spidering out from the drains. It felt like going backward, like we were slowly rewinding our way to where we went wrong. We started passing RVs on the road more frequently, at night mostly. Always white, always a little too similar. One even had the same broken right blinker as ours did, pulsing red into the mist like a warning light. And every time I looked into the driver's seat, the silhouette was just a little too still. One morning, Melanie shook me awake. She was pale, shaking, holding her phone like it had burned her. I got a message, she said. It was from an unknown number, no contact name, just an address. One she didn't recognize. But I did. It was the first place we ever dry camped, just off the Blue Ridge Parkway, down a gravel path barely wide enough for a single vehicle. We'd parked there for a night under a canopy of pines. I remember it smelled like sap and rain. I remember how happy we were that night. We should have known that was the last time it would feel normal. I think it wants us to go back, she said. I didn't ask how she knew that. I was already packing. We arrived at dusk. The trees had overgrown. The gravel path was more dirt than rock now, but it was the same clearing, same crooked tree on the edge of the bluff, same whisper of wind that smelled faintly of antifreeze and pine. And sitting there, right in the middle, like it had never left, was our RV, the same dents, the same sun-faded decal along the side, even the same license plate, cracked down the middle. But the interior lights were on. I don't know how long we stood there. Melanie finally whispered, "We left the fridge open, and the freezer." I blinked. What? When we ran out, that last day before we dumped it, we left it unplugged, full of food. Her voice dropped to a whisper. It doesn't smell, not even a little. She was right. There was no rot, no flies, no mold curling up the windows like there should have been. Just that same sterile, sickly clean smell, plastic and citrus cleaner, like someone had been taking care of it. We should have walked away. We didn't. The door was unlocked. The steps extended themselves with a mechanical groan as if welcoming us. I went in first. Nothing had changed. The rug Melanie picked out was still there. The scratch on the counter from where I dropped my multi-tool. Even the half-empty bottle of water sitting in the cup holder. But there was something wrong with the light. Too steady, too dim. Like the bulbs weren't powered by electricity anymore, but by something slower, hungrier. Dusty wouldn't come in. He whimpered at the steps, circled twice, then lay down and howled. Melanie stood in the doorway. She didn't move, didn't breathe, almost. "It's clean," she whispered. "Everything's exactly how it was, except it's like it doesn't know we left." I opened the fridge. It was empty. No smell. No trace. No hint we'd ever left a pound of raw meat and produce inside it to rot. But scratched into the plastic at the back in long, uneven gouges was a single word. "Stay." Melanie backed out. She turned and walked fast back to the car. She didn't scream. She didn't say a word. She just got in, locked the doors, and waited for me. But I couldn't leave yet. I had to know. I went to the back. The bathroom door was open this time. No humming, no fog, just a small room, empty, silent. But on the mirror, written in a child's handwriting with something that looked suspiciously like black mold smeared into words, was a sentence. "You can't be home until you come back." I ran. I slammed the RV door shut behind me, and the entire vehicle groaned like something disappointed. I didn't look back. I didn't care if it started itself and followed us down the road again. That night, we drove until dawn. We didn't talk, not until the sun rose and the mountains behind us faded into fog. Finally, Melanie said, "We left a piece of ourselves in there." I didn't answer, because she was right, and we both knew it. We started getting mail again. That might not sound strange, but we hadn't forwarded anything. We hadn't filed any change of address forms. We were living out of cheap hotels and parking lots. Our mailing address was a burned-out P.O. box we hadn't checked in months, but letters started showing up on our windshield. On motel nightstands we hadn't touched. On gas pumps while we were inside paying, they were always folded in half. No stamps, just our names, mine in sharp, blocky handwriting. Melanie's in a cursive that felt older than paper, the kind of ink that bleeds even when it's dry. Each note was different. One said, "You took what wasn't yours." Another just had a list of dates, each one a night we'd slept inside the RV. But the worst one didn't say anything. It just had a sketch, rough, childlike, done in black crayon that left streaks on my fingers. It showed a bed, and underneath it, eyes. Melanie didn't want to see any more. She stopped opening them, but I kept them all. I told myself it was about patterns, that if I could just figure out what it wanted, we could break the connection. But deep down, I think I just needed to prove I wasn't going insane. That was when the dreams started. They always began the same way. I was standing outside the RV, fog coiled around my ankles. The windows were lit from within, but the light didn't behave right. It flickered before the shadows moved. It pulsed in a rhythm that felt biological, like breathing. When I'd finally open the door, it would be empty, but every surface was wet, not with water. Not blood, just wet, as if the whole thing had been pulled from the belly of something sleeping, and I'd hear it, always from the bathroom, always behind the mirror. You never left. I'd wake up gasping, sweating, guilt pressing on my chest like an anchor. The worst part? Melanie had the same dreams. She didn't tell me right away, but one night she woke up screaming, clawing at the skin on her forearms like something was trying to burrow into her. "They're watching from the walls," she sobbed. "They keep saying my name from under the sink." We were unraveling, not just mentally. Physically, our skin got pale, our sleep fractured. Dusty stopped eating for days at a time. He'd just stare at the walls and growl, low and steady, like he could hear something neither of us could. We tried everything. Therapists, clergy, a paranormal investigator from a podcast who barely lasted an hour with us before bailing, muttering something about tethered energy. But the more we tried to explain, the more absurd it sounded. We left an RV in the Smoky Mountains. It found its way back. No one believed us. Why would they? But one person did. Sort of. We were in Asheville, checking into yet another nameless roadside inn, when the desk clerk, a woman maybe in her 60s, with thick glasses and a cross tattooed on her hand, stared at us a moment too long. "You two traveling in a white Class C?" she asked, like she already knew the answer. We froze. "Don't worry," she said. "I've seen that thing parked across the street 4 nights now. But no one ever gets out. Just idles for hours, then vanishes." She slid the keycard across the counter, room 212, then added, quieter, "There's a church down the road. Ask for Brother Kane. He doesn't advertise, but he knows what rides inside things." We didn't sleep that night. We went straight to the church at sunrise. It was old, wooden, half collapsed on one side and covered in ivy, but it smelled normal, like candle wax and dust. The first normal smell we'd had in weeks. Brother Kane met us without a word, just nodded and led us to the back, a storage room full of mildewed hymnals and broken pews. "Sit," he said. "Tell me." We did. All of it. He didn't flinch. When we were done, he just sighed and rubbed his temples. "There's places in this country," he said, "that remember you better than people do. Camp too long in one, shed a little blood, leave a little fear, and they remember you deep." He looked at us both. "But an RV? That's different. It's not just yours. It becomes a vessel. You bring pieces of places inside. You don't get to choose what stays behind." I asked him what we were supposed to do. How do we break it? He looked toward the tiny stained glass window like he was watching something approach from far away. You already made a deal, he said. You took shelter when you should have run. You stayed when it asked you to leave. That thing, it didn't just follow you. It woke up inside you. Melanie asked what that meant, but he just stood and lit a single white candle. If it comes again, he said, don't run this time. Don't speak. Don't fight it. He looked at me dead on. Just listen. That night, we parked the rental behind an old feed store on the outskirts of town, somewhere forgotten, somewhere nothing else lived. Melanie didn't argue. I think we both knew it was coming. The moment the sun dipped below the ridge, I felt it, like pressure in my ears, like something vast and patient leaning close. At 2:17 a.m., the headlights blinked on. Right across the field, half hidden behind bare trees, our old RV was waiting. Engine off. No driver, no footsteps, but the lights were on, and something was moving behind the windshield, slowly, like it was pacing or swaying. I could feel Melanie's heartbeat just from how close she stood beside me. Dusty had gone stiff, his tail down, his entire little body humming like a tuning fork. I started toward it. Melanie grabbed my arm. What are you doing? I didn't answer. I didn't know. It didn't feel like bravery. It felt like surrender, like inevitability. Something had looped closed, and all I could do was step inside it. When I opened the RV door, it was warm inside. Too warm, stale, like breath held too long. The lights flickered, but they weren't electrical. They pulsed like a heartbeat, slow, measured, familiar. And the smell, I can't describe it exactly. Not rot, not smoke, something older. Like the scent of your childhood bedroom after 20 years locked tight. Like memory turned solid. Everything was just how we left it. The cushions, the old coffee stain, the dog's leash hooked to the cupboard. My jacket still hung over the driver's seat. There was even a scrap of Melanie's journal still tucked under a coffee mug. It was our RV, and it wasn't. The surfaces pulsed when I touched them, like the walls were breathing in reverse. Every reflection was off by half a second. The shadows didn't match the light. And behind me, in the back, a voice. My voice. But younger, worn thinner by wind and guilt. Why'd you come back? I didn't answer. Because I hadn't come back. It had. I followed the voice down the narrow hall toward the bathroom, the same bathroom where I'd once found a rust-colored handprint that didn't match either of ours. The same one I'd avoided cleaning because the mirror never stayed clean. Inside, the light flickered once and died, pitch black, but I could hear something, breathing, clicking, like nails on porcelain. The mirror glowed faintly, and then something behind the glass moved. Not a reflection, a shadow. It leaned forward until it was almost pressing through, but its features never sharpened. Its head was wrong, stretched long and sunken, like someone had worn a mask too long and it started becoming real. I wanted to run, scream, fight, but I remembered what Brother Cain said. Don't run, don't speak, just listen. So I stood there, frozen, and it spoke. Not in words, in memory. I saw us, Melanie and I, camping that first night, how we laughed, how the wind curled under the door and whispered names we'd forgotten, how the trees pressed close without ever moving. I saw the thing crouched above us while we slept, its fingers curled into the insulation, mouth pressed to the ceiling vent. I saw the moment it entered, not with force, but gently, like a sigh. It didn't want to possess. It wanted to inhabit, to be part of a life, to ride in memories, to never be left behind again. And that's when I understood. We hadn't brought it with us. We'd become it. All that fear, that paranoia, that long, slow bleed of who we were. It wasn't corruption. It was transformation. And it was almost complete. I turned around. Melanie stood in the doorway, her mouth trembling, her hands clenching and unclenching. I stepped toward her. She stepped back, and I realized she didn't recognize me. Not fully. Not anymore. Mel, I said, voice cracking. And in that moment, I saw the war inside her, the urge to run, the urge to stay, the ache of love versus the terror of recognition. But she didn't run. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled something out, a matchbook, one of the old ones, from our first road trip. The kind we kept as souvenirs back when everything was still about memories and not survival. She lit a match, held it up, then dropped it onto the thin curtain by the bathroom. The fire spread faster than it should have, like the whole place had been waiting to burn. I didn't scream. I didn't move. I stood there, watching the mirror melt, the shadows writhe, the air turn orange and blinding. I heard her voice just once before everything went silent. "Come back to me." I woke up 2 days later in a hospital in Knoxville. Melanie had pulled me out. I had second-degree burns and smoke damage in my lungs. Dusty was okay. She'd wrapped him in her coat and carried him half a mile to the road, sobbing. They never found the RV. The fire had burned too hot, too clean, like nothing physical had ever been there. We haven't gone camping since. We live in a small house now, still keep the curtains open, still sleep with the dog between us. And sometimes, when the wind shifts, I hear it. A faint engine idling, a whisper through the trees, a pulse in the walls. But I don't fear it anymore, because I understand now. The scariest thing isn't what follows you out of the forest. It's what you invite in when you ignore the voice telling you to leave. We didn't just escape the Smoky Mountains, we escaped ourselves. And maybe that's what it wanted us to see all along. You don't always recognize the moment your world tilts off its axis. Sometimes it's subtle, a sound out of place, a glance that lasts a little too long, a quiet you didn't expect. But once that shift happens, you feel it in your chest, in your gut. And when you're parked out in the middle of nowhere with only thin aluminum walls between you and the unknown, that feeling can rot you from the inside out. My name's Jack Whitmore, 57 years old, retired lineman, and a full-time RVer for the last 3 years. I thought I'd seen a lot out on the road. Storms that rip through Arizona like freight trains, folks living out of gutted vans and Walmart lots, coyotes bold enough to brush up against your tires in the dark. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for what I experienced at an RV park just off a back road in southern New Mexico. I'd been solo since my wife passed. Cancer, 3 years back. We always planned to hit the road together in retirement, chase sunsets through the Rockies, wake up by lakes with steam rising off the water. After she died, I didn't know what to do with myself. The house was too quiet, too full of her. So I sold it, bought a used Winnebago, and started moving. It wasn't glamorous, not like the travel blogs make it seem, but it was peaceful. Usually. The park I rolled into that day was called Crescent Hills RV Retreat. That's what the crooked wooden sign said anyway. Hand-painted letters, barely hanging from a post that leaned like it was tired of standing. I almost didn't stop. It was one of those campgrounds not listed on any of the apps. No reviews, no star ratings, just a pin on a paper map I picked up from a truck stop. I was low on gas, low on cell signal, and even lower on patience. The gravel crunching under my tires felt good after hours on the highway. The place was mostly empty. Only 3 other rigs that I could see, all parked far apart from each other. One was a beat-up Airstream with faded stickers. Another looked like an old Class C, sun-bleached and sagging at the edges. The third was a matte black Sprinter van with blackout curtains drawn tight. I picked a spot at the far end, near a cluster of scrubby mesquite trees and the remnants of an old playground. Metal slide rusted through, 2 swings hanging limp. There was something about the silence there. Not peaceful, just expectant, like the whole place was holding its breath. I stepped out, stretched my legs, and was immediately struck by how quiet it was. No birds, no wind, even the bugs seemed to keep their distance. The office was a squat little shack, empty when I knocked. A small laminated sign taped to the door read, "Pick a site, someone will be by after sundown." That should have been the first red flag, but I was tired. I figured maybe it was a mom and pop place, maybe they were just running things casual. I've stayed in dozens like that. I cooked some dinner, cracked open a beer, and sat outside with my feet up. As the sun dipped low, the shadows from those trees stretched long and sharp across the gravel. I watched them creep closer to the RV like they had somewhere to be. It got cold fast. Desert chill setting in like a hand on the back of your neck. And then the van door opened. The black Sprinter. It slid open slow, almost silently. A man stepped out, tall, wiry, maybe early 40s. His clothes were dark and clean, too clean, like he'd just stepped out of a department store catalog. I raised a hand to wave, but he didn't return it. Didn't even glance my way. He just stood there, staring out at the horizon, like he was waiting for something. Then, after a full minute, he walked around to the back of his van, opened the rear doors, and pulled out a large duffel bag. He carried it toward the trees. No flashlight, no headlamp, just walked into the dark like it was nothing. I watched until he disappeared into the shadows. Waited. 5 minutes. 10. Nothing. Eventually I went inside, locked the door, told myself it wasn't my business. People do weird things out here all the time. Bury ashes, pray in the woods, film videos for TikTok. I shut all the blinds and settled in with a book. Around 1:30 a.m., I heard the first sound, not from outside, from inside. It was the sink faucet, dripping. I hadn't used it in hours. Plip, plip, plip. I got up, twisted the handle tight, still dripping. I shut the pump off entirely. Didn't help. Then I noticed something else. The bathroom mirror was fogged, light condensation like someone had taken a hot shower. But I hadn't. The air smelled faintly of something too. Not sulfur, not rot, something metallic, like blood and pennies. I checked every window, every lock. Nothing had been tampered with. Nothing was open. The smell disappeared as quickly as it came. I barely slept. Woke up to sunlight burning through the side window and the sound of gravel crunching under footsteps outside. I peeked through the blinds. No one there. But on the step right beneath the door was a dead bird. No signs of trauma, just laid there. Wings splayed, eyes open, like it had fallen from the sky and decided not to hit the ground. I buried it behind the trees, right near where the man had gone with his bag the night before. The dirt there was soft, softer than it should have been in that climate. And there were other small mounds, subtle, circular, uneven spacing. I didn't ask questions. I just marked the spot in my mind and went back to my rig, told myself I was being dramatic, that maybe this place just had weird vibes, that I'd leave by noon and not think about it again. But that night, something knocked on my door. 3 slow knocks, heavy, like knuckles on hollow metal. And when I opened the blind to look, no one was there. Just footprints, bare human footprints in the gravel, leading away from the door and into the trees. You ever feel watched? Not just the paranoia kind, not the maybe someone's looking at me feeling. I'm talking about the kind that drills down into the marrow of your bones. The kind that makes your hands shake and your mouth go dry, because every instinct you've got is screaming that something wrong is nearby. That's what hit me the moment I stepped outside and saw those bare footprints leading from my door into the trees. No shoes, no socks. The impressions were deep, spaced unevenly. One heel dug in more than the other, like whoever made them had a limp. I followed them with my eyes until they vanished into the brush past the swing set. Then I just stood there, frozen. The desert chill bit through my shirt, but I was sweating down the back of my neck. I went back inside, locked the deadbolt. Then I slid the table in front of the door and propped my hiking boots under the handle for good measure. My flashlight was already in arm's reach, but I grabbed my hunting knife from the drawer and set it beside the bed. I didn't sleep. Couldn't. Every creak, every groan from the rig made my heart stutter. I told myself it was the wind, the temperature change causing metal to flex. I said it so many times I started to hate the sound of my own voice in my head. At some point, maybe around 4 a.m., I heard the van door again. The black Sprinter. Just the soft of it sliding open. I peeked through the slats of the blinds. He was back. Same guy, standing perfectly still by the edge of the trees. This time, though, he wasn't holding a duffel bag. He was holding a shovel. Just standing there like a statue carved out of dusk and shadow. Then he knelt, started digging, slow, methodical, like he had all the time in the world. I wanted to say something, yell, confront him. But I couldn't move. My throat had gone dry as bone, and every part of me said, Don't open that door. Don't interrupt him. Whatever he's doing, it's not meant to be seen. And then he stopped. His head turned. He looked directly at my window, straight into the blind I was peeking through, and smiled. That did it. I fell back so fast I cracked my elbow on the cabinet. The pain was sharp, but it barely registered over the surge of adrenaline. I crawled to the other side of the rig and shut the blinds on every window. I don't know how long I sat there, knife in hand, barely breathing, but I never heard the shovel again. When morning came, I opened the door slowly. The footprints were still there. The patch of dirt where he'd been digging, disturbed, fresh, no rocks over it, no attempt to hide it. But the van was gone. I walked the entire campground, scanning every site. Nothing. Just the same faded Airstream and that old Class C that hadn't moved since I arrived. No one saw him leave. No engine noise, no tracks in the gravel where the van should have pulled out. Just vanished. I packed up as fast as I could and drove out without even looking back. My gut was twisting the whole way. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I needed to put distance between me and that place. I ended up at a state park 2 hours away. Big lake, clean sights, full hookups. The kind of place where families bring their kids and retirees play cards under awnings. I parked, hooked up, and finally let myself breathe. That night, I slept. Not well, but better than I had in days. And then, on the second night, I heard the knocking again. 3 knocks. Same rhythm, same weight. But this time, it came from the back window. I jolted upright, heart punching my ribs. The back of the rig, that's where my bed was. The only thing behind that wall was the woods, thick pine. No trail, no campsites back there. I slid off the mattress, crouched low, and inched toward the window. My hand trembled as I reached for the corner of the blind. I hesitated, every cell in my body screaming not to look, but I did. And there, half shrouded in shadow, just beyond the edge of the forest, stood the man. Same dark clothes, same posture, no van, no shovel, just him. Watching. I didn't wait this time. I grabbed my keys, started the engine, and tore out of the sight with the hoses still dangling. Didn't care. Didn't stop. I drove until the sun came up, until my gas light was blinking, until I found a crowded truck stop with people and noise and cameras on every pole. I parked there for 2 nights. Slept with the knife under my pillow and the rig locked up like a bank vault. You think you can run from things like that? That if you just drive far enough, put enough asphalt between you and whatever followed you, it'll give up. But it's not always about the place. Sometimes it's about you. Because a week later, I was parked in Colorado. High elevation. Gorgeous view. Isolated, but not too isolated. I was drinking coffee outside when I saw it. A small circle of dirt by the edge of the trees, soft, freshly turned, just like the mounds behind Crescent Hills. And beside it, a single bare footprint. I didn't move at first. I just stared at that footprint, half sunk into the dirt like it had been pressed there with intention. Like it was a message. A signature. The air felt thinner than it should have, not just from the altitude. Something unseen was pressing down, like the sky had gotten heavier. I swallowed hard and backed toward the RV without turning my back to the trees. My mug slipped from my hand and shattered, but I didn't even flinch. I just kept backing up until I hit the door, reached behind, and twisted the handle open. I climbed inside, locked it, shut every blind again, every window, and I waited. Hours passed. Nothing happened. No knocks, no movement, just silence, like even the birds were holding their breath. But I knew something was still out there. And I realized then this wasn't just about a campground. It wasn't the van. It wasn't the man. It was something that had attached itself to me the night I first saw him. Something that waited until I was alone, vulnerable, removed from the noise and the safety that came with crowds. Because RV life can be lonely. That's the part nobody talks about when they post pictures of sunsets and campfires and open roads. The silence, the distance from anyone who might notice when something goes wrong. The way even a busy campground can feel like a ghost town after dark. You think you're free, that you've escaped the traps of routine, the suffocating grip of the modern world. But there's another side to solitude. It makes you a target. I started keeping a journal, not for therapy, just to track things, times, locations, smells, sounds, patterns, anything that might give me a clue, because it wasn't always him. Sometimes it was just wrongness. One night in Utah, I parked on BLM land, beautiful, wide desert view, no one for miles. I set up camp like normal, fire ring, chair, a little music, peaceful. But around 11 p.m., I started hearing voices, whispers, faint just under the wind. I muted the music. They kept going. Too soft to make out the words, but definitely human. I stood by the fire, straining to listen. They came from every direction, not moving closer, just circling, always at the edge of hearing, like they knew exactly how loud to be to keep me unsure. I shouted, "Who's out there?" The whispers stopped, all at once. Silence dropped like a curtain. Then, from somewhere out beyond the firelight, a man's voice answered, "You left it open." 3 words. Calm, slow, clear. My blood turned to ice. I spun in a full circle. My flashlight beam cut through emptiness. There was no one, just sagebrush and sand. "You left it open," he said again. And this time, it came from behind me. I ran for the RV, slammed the door, locked every latch. Left what open? The door? My mind? Some kind of invitation? I didn't sleep that night either. And in the morning, I found something hanging from my side mirror. A tiny dream catcher. Cheap, handmade. Twine and twigs. Definitely not mine. I left it there. Drove off with it still swinging in the wind, just to see if anyone would come claim it. No one did. Every place I stayed after that, something followed. Not always visible, not always loud, but I could feel it. In New Mexico, I woke up with dirt on my sheets. In Idaho, my rear camera caught a figure walking past at 2:43 a.m., but when I stepped outside seconds later, no footprints in the frost. In Montana, I heard a baby crying in the distance, middle of nowhere. No vehicles, no campsites, just that soft, broken wail over and over until it faded with the dawn. I told myself I was losing it. That isolation was playing tricks on me. But then something changed. One night in Oregon, I met someone. Her name was Sadie. Mid-30s, traveling solo in a vintage Winnebago, she'd rebuilt herself. She had one of those smiles that didn't ask for attention, just made you feel like maybe the world wasn't completely broken. We met at a state park near the coast. Fog rolled in thick every evening, and the trees loomed like old gods. We shared stories around the fire, laughed, ate burnt hot dogs and canned chili. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I wasn't alone in the fight against whatever this was. Sadie believed me. She didn't mock it, didn't question it. She just nodded, like she'd been waiting for someone to say it out loud. Then she told me her own story. She'd been parked outside of Flagstaff the previous fall when she saw something crawling out from beneath her RV. Said it looked like a man, but too thin, joints bending the wrong way. It didn't see her at first. It just crawled into the woods like it was hunting something else. She left that night and never returned. When she finished, we just sat in silence, listening to the crackle of the fire, the hum of wind through wet pine needles. Then she said, "They don't always take interest in you, but once they do, they mark you." I asked what that meant. She looked at me, eyes hard. "It means you stopped being a traveler. You became a destination." That line hit me harder than I expected. A destination. Something had stopped chasing and started circling, watching, returning. That night, I didn't sleep in the RV. I slept in Sadie's rig, with her parked between mine and the woods. Safety in numbers. We left the interior lights on, shared a bottle of whiskey, and talked until dawn cracked through the fog like a blade. For the first time since that man with the shovel, I felt like maybe I wasn't powerless. Maybe we weren't alone in this, but I also knew it wasn't over. I wish I could say Sadie and I stayed together, that we formed some kind of alliance against whatever forces had latched onto us. But RV life doesn't work that way. People cross paths, overlap for a heartbeat, and drift apart. That's the rhythm of the road. Unspoken, bittersweet. 2 days later, she left before sunrise. No goodbye, just a note on my wiper blade that said, "Don't camp near water. They move easier through it. Stay high, stay dry, you'll feel them before you see them." After that, I started noticing the patterns, the static I used to hear on the radio. It didn't happen in the desert, but near lakes, rivers, even creeks, the signal would garble, twist, and underneath the fuzz, sometimes I swore I heard voices. Not full words, just fragments. My name once. A laugh that matched no one I knew. I started avoiding water. But avoiding something doesn't make it stop existing. One campsite, up in Washington State, was supposed to be safe. It was perched high in the Cascades, steep cliffs, dry brush, a long gravel road that wound through switchbacks and dropped into a forgotten little clearing. There were only 2 other rigs up there, a retired couple in a fifth wheel and a single dad with his young son. Real campers. Salt of the earth types. We nodded politely, traded supplies, but mostly kept to ourselves. It was the kind of quiet place where people come to forget what's wrong with the world. Until night fell. It started with a smell, something acrid, like burnt meat left out too long. Not rotten, worse. Like heat and hair and something chemical under the skin. I thought maybe someone's generator was leaking, but when I stepped outside, the air was still. No smoke, no hum of engines. Just the smell and the quiet. The kind of quiet that presses in on your skull, that makes you hear things. Your blood, your breath, the shift of your own bones. I walked toward the edge of the camp road, just far enough to see the dad standing outside his RV, holding a flashlight, scanning the trees. "You smell that?" I asked him. He nodded, but didn't speak. His kids stood in the doorway behind him, small hand gripping the frame, watching something I couldn't see. The dad finally said, "We saw something last night." I waited. He continued. "It stood by that stump just past your rig. Tall, long arms, too long, just stood there, watched, then walked away." "An animal?" He shook his head. "Not one I know." The next morning, they were gone. Packed up and gone before sunrise, like Sadie. The older couple left later that day without a word. Just hooked up their fifth wheel and disappeared down the mountain. And I stayed. Because something in me needed to know what it wanted. Why it kept showing up. Why me? That night, I set my phone to record and placed it in the window. I turned off every light, sat in the dark, in silence, waiting. Sometime around 3 a.m., I heard it again. Footsteps. Soft at first, then deliberate. Crunching gravel, pausing, sniffing, then the knock. Just one. Against the rear panel of the RV, the same spot it knocked that very first night. My lungs locked up, I sat frozen, every muscle screaming not to move. Another knock. Same cadence. I stood, inch by inch, and stepped toward the window. My heart hammered so hard I thought it might give me away. I peeked through the blind. Nothing, just trees. Moonlight. Mist rolling low across the dirt, but the footsteps continued. Around the RV, like it was circling, then silence, then the scream. Not human, not animal. Something that scraped both categories and made my skin crawl. High and sharp and wet, like it tore through a throat too small to hold it, and then nothing again. When I checked my phone the next morning, the recording was gone. Deleted. Not corrupted. Not moved, just gone. I hadn't touched it. No one had. That was when I understood. This wasn't a haunting. It wasn't just bad energy or something that could be fixed with sage and salt. It was intelligent. It watched. It waited. It chose. After that, I stopped telling people what I had seen, because no matter how I framed it, the truth was too much. Even the ones who claimed to believe, they'd glaze over, disconnect, offer vague platitudes or advice I'd already tried. What do you do when the thing stalking you knows you're trying to get rid of it? You keep moving, but not to run, to keep it from settling, from nesting. You stay in motion because if you stop long enough in one place, something starts to grow around you. The air thickens, the shadows stretch, things knock when they shouldn't, the world starts to fold around you, and the road, the open road, becomes both salvation and curse. Because every exit, every new site, every charming little campground tucked behind pines and picnic tables, it's another chance to feel normal, another trap. You learn to live with it, the way people live with grief or chronic pain. Some nights are quiet, beautiful even. Stars like fire, breeze like silk. You let your guard down. But other nights, you feel the shift. You wake up and your rig smells wrong, or your windows fog from the outside, Or there's something tapping, not knocking, tapping at the skylight. And when you look, nothing's there. Somewhere outside Missoula, I met a man who wouldn't tell me his name. Just introduced himself with a dry hand and a tired nod and asked if I minded sharing a fire. I didn't. We sat there in silence for a long time, watching the flames crackle under the pitch of an early autumn sky. No wind, no bugs, just the occasional creak of the woods around us. And then, out of nowhere, he said, "It follows those who see it." I didn't ask what. I didn't need to. Instead, I just looked at him and nodded because I knew he was right. He reached into the folds of his coat and pulled out a leather pouch, unrolled it slow like it was sacred. Inside were little charms, carved bones, dried herbs, metal shapes I didn't recognize. "You can't get rid of it," he continued. "Not completely, but you can confuse it, distract it, slow it down." "Has it ever hurt you?" I asked. The man didn't answer for a long time, just stared into the fire. Then he said, "It doesn't need to. That's not the kind of thing it is. You hurt yourself trying to understand it, trying to ignore it." And then, before I could ask more, he stood up, nodded once, and walked into the trees. I never saw him again. From there, the road blurred. States passed like dreams. Idaho, Nevada, Utah. I stayed high in the mountains when I could, away from lakes and rivers, away from the low, wet places where things gathered. But no matter how far I went, I'd feel it sometimes, just on the edge of sleep, like a pressure, a weight on the roof of the RV, a shiver in the frame, a knock that didn't come from wind or wildlife. One night, deep in the Arizona desert, I woke up choking. The air inside the rig had turned sour, like sulfur and mold. My throat closed. My eyes watered. When I reached for the door, it wouldn't open. I wasn't locked in. There was no latch. But something was pressing on the other side. Not pounding, not shaking. Just holding, like it wanted to see how long I could take it. I grabbed the emergency hammer I keep under the sink and slammed it against the window. It shattered in one hit. And just like that, the pressure vanished. The door swung open. The air cleared. There was nothing out there. Just desert, just stars. But I knew better. I knew what it had done. It didn't want me dead. It wanted me frightened. It wanted to wear me down, to make me welcome it eventually. There's a point on the road where you stop looking for home. You stop thinking of campgrounds as places to rest. They're battlegrounds. Each one is another test, another invitation to the same darkness wearing a different mask. There was one place near a canyon in New Mexico where I stayed longer than I should have. 3 nights. Too long. It was beautiful. Red cliffs, wild sunrises, wind that sang through the stones. But there was a trailer at the far end of the site. A rusted airstream, long abandoned, slouched into the dirt like it had been trying to sink out of sight. No plates, no signs of life. But at night I saw a lantern flicker in the window. On the second night, I walked down there. I don't know why. Curiosity, maybe, or maybe something deeper, the kind of pull you feel in dreams when your feet move without permission. The closer I got, the colder the air became. It wasn't just desert chill. It was wrong, like the world stopped moving there. No bugs, no wind, just silence and stillness. And then I heard the voice from inside the airstream. It said my name, once, soft, like it was tasting it. I ran. Didn't stop until I was back in my RV, keys in the ignition, tearing down the canyon road with gravel flying and tires screaming through the dust. I didn't sleep again for 2 days. But the worst came later, in Texas, a state that stretches too far in every direction where the flatness plays tricks on your sense of time. I was parked in a little private lot behind a gas station just off a forgotten highway. The owner let travelers stay for a night if they paid in cash and didn't ask questions. It was hot, oppressively hot, and even with the AC unit rattling, the inside of the RV felt like a tin oven. I slept shirtless, one leg propped in front of a battery-powered fan, eyes half open, mind too fried to dream. Sometime around 2 a.m., I woke up and realized the fan had stopped. The air was dead still. I sat up, every power source was off. Fridge, lights, AC, everything. I checked the panel, battery full, generator fine, but everything was off. And then the smell. The same one I'd caught in Washington. Burnt meat, hair, something old and wet and wrong. I didn't look out the window this time. I didn't move. Because I already knew what was there. I could hear it breathing on the roof, slow, heavy, like it was lying down, stretched across the metal, savoring the heat from the day or maybe from me. It stayed for an hour, then 2, then 3. And just before dawn, just before that faint blush of morning broke the black, it knocked, one time, dead center above my bed. Then silence. And when the light came, the power returned, as if nothing had happened, but I saw it, the dent on the roof, as if something large had rested there, pressed its weight into the aluminum until it caved, just slightly, just enough. It knew where I slept. I stayed off the grid after that. No more campgrounds, no more hookups, just me, the road, and the vast emptiness of places too forgotten to have names. Abandoned ranger stations, dry washes in the middle of nowhere, ghost towns where even the echoes had grown tired of returning. I needed to vanish for a while. Needed to figure out if the thing was following me or if I had brought it with me all along. There's a difference, you know. One implies you can outrun it. The other means it lives inside you. Out in West Texas, I parked beside an old freight rail line, the kind no one used anymore, except for maybe the coyotes that trotted between the rusted cars and the mesquite. It was too quiet, not peaceful, vacant, like sound didn't stick around. Even my footsteps felt muffled, like the dirt had forgotten how to echo. I told myself it was just the dust, the heat, the long isolation, but I knew better. That night, something knocked on the side of the RV. Not the roof this time. Eye level. 3 times. Soft. Deliberate. I didn't move, didn't breathe, and then I heard it. A whisper. Just outside my window. But it wasn't in English. It wasn't in any language I've ever heard. It sounded like it was being spoken backwards, like thought that had rotted. And in that moment, I understood something awful. It wasn't trying to scare me. That wasn't the purpose. It was practicing, testing, seeing what I'd do, how I'd respond. Measuring my fear like a carpenter measures wood before the cut. I didn't sleep, didn't eat the next day. Just drove until the sun bled out behind the horizon, and even then, I kept going. I finally reached the borderlands. Arizona again. This time the deep southern flats, where the land turns dry and pale and the night sky is so wide it feels like a bowl turned over your world. I pulled into a forgotten campsite carved out of old tribal land. There were no signs, no services, just a circle of fire pits and a dusty trail leading nowhere. And for once, I felt peace, real, bone-deep silence, a wind that smelled clean, a sky that didn't press down on me. I stayed there 3 days, didn't see a soul, didn't hear a single unnatural sound. Until the 4th night. It started with a dream. I was back in my childhood home, everything in grayscale. My father was speaking, but his mouth didn't move. He just stared at me, bleeding from the ears, as the walls bent in like wax near a flame. When I woke, I was standing outside the RV, no shoes. Middle of the desert, the door wide open behind me. I hadn't unlocked it. I hadn't stepped out. But there I was, barefoot in the sand, under a moonless sky, with a whisper in my ear that sounded like my father, but wasn't him. "You sleep too loud," it said, and then silence. I slammed the door, locked it 6 times, pulled the shades, put salt along the floorboards. That old man I met near Missoula had given me more than just riddles. He'd given me a few protections too. They didn't stop it, but they slowed it, long enough for me to think. I started reading. Old books, old stories. Accounts from travelers and tribal shamans and pioneer journals, all whispering the same idea in different tongues. There are things that live between places. They feed on the displacement, the lostness, the drift. They're drawn to movement, not stillness. They wait on roads and in threshold places, campsites, doorways, old motel rooms. They wear familiarity like camouflage, the voice of a loved one, the creak of your own footsteps, the rhythm of your breathing played back a half beat off. They don't kill, they unravel. Somewhere near Joshua Tree, I met a woman, older than me, tough, been on the road 20 years, drove a battered Winnebago that looked like it had survived every kind of storm. She invited me to coffee at sunrise, Didn't ask why my hands were shaking, just handed me a mug and said, "I know that look." I didn't pretend, just said, "When did you first see it?" She nodded, as if that confirmed everything. New Mexico, 2006. Thought it was a man at first. Hitchhiker. Gave him a ride. Then I looked in the mirror and saw he didn't have a face. We didn't speak much after that. Didn't need to. We sat there, sipping in silence, letting the warmth soak into our bones like sun through cracked glass. Before I left, she gave me something, a string of bones and beads tied with red thread. "For the mirrors," she said. "It doesn't like reflections, shows it what it really is." I haven't taken it down since. Still, the encounters grew bolder. One night near a reservation in Oregon, I heard laughter outside the RV, high, childlike, but off. It circled me for hours, scratching the doors, tapping on the windows, mimicking voices I hadn't heard in years. My mother, my brother, a girl I dated in high school. All dead voices, all wrong, like it had pulled them from some half-remembered grave. I sat there with a kitchen knife in one hand and a rosary in the other, knowing neither would do anything. And then the laughter stopped. Not faded, just cut, like someone hit mute on the world. And the silence that followed, that was the worst part, because that's when I knew it had entered. Not physically, mentally, emotionally. It was inside me now, inside the cracks. The fear had given it space. After that night, I started losing time. I'd wake up parked in places I didn't remember driving to. Strange trailheads, forest pullouts, old parking lots behind shuttered diners. Places that stank of mildew and history and felt like they hadn't been touched in years. Once I came to in a ghost town near the Nevada border. The whole place had been eaten away by dust and wind, and no signs, no markers, no people. Just gutted storefronts, collapsed porches, and one half-burned church with no roof. The RV was parked in front of it, engine still ticking, lights off, and on the windshield, written in the condensation left by my own breath, were the words, "Stay put." I don't remember writing it, but the handwriting was mine. That was the first time I broke. Not cried, not panicked, just broke. I sat on the dusty steps of that old church until the sun came up, staring at nothing, letting the silence soak through me like blood through cotton. It wasn't just fear anymore. It was erosion. My sense of reality, my own autonomy, wearing away. I didn't know where I ended, and it began. That night, I almost drove the RV into a ravine. Swear to God, I had my hands on the wheel, foot hovering over the gas, staring into that black gash of earth like it was the only exit I had left. And then I heard it. A voice, my voice, coming from the back of the RV. But it wasn't me. It was cold, detached, like a playback with the soul stripped out. It said, "Not yet. You're not ready to leave." I turned off the ignition, sat there shaking until dawn, didn't drive again for a week. I stayed put, like the message said, and slowly I started thinking, not reacting, not running. Thinking. If this thing feeds on disorientation, if it blooms in motion and fear and absence of structure, then maybe I had to give it something different. Roots. Routine. I set up camp on BLM land near northern Arizona, out by the red cliffs where the air smells like copper and cedar, and the sunsets burn out in layers of pink and rust. I stayed for 30 days, marked each one with a line in a notebook. Same routine every day. Wake, make coffee, walk the same loop, eat, journal, sleep. No variation, no wandering, no invitations, no fear, and for a time, it worked. No knocks, no voices, no waking up somewhere else. The thing was still there. I could feel it, like pressure behind the eyes, like static in a dead radio. But it wasn't growing anymore. It was starving. But starving things don't die quietly. On the 26th night, I had a dream, the kind that feels realer than waking. I was in the RV, only it was upside down, bolted to the ceiling of a canyon, gravity reversed. Blood dripped upward into the floor. My reflection in the microwave door was smiling at me, but I wasn't. And then the door creaked open, and something crawled in. It had my face. But wrong. No pupils. Skin too tight over the bones. Its mouth open too far, and it said in a perfect copy of my voice, "You think standing still saves you? I woke up with dried blood under my nose and a piece of broken mirror on the floor beside the bed. I hadn't moved, but something had. On day 31, I left. Not because I was afraid, but because I understood now it wasn't just a haunting. It was a symbiosis. It needed me to keep going, and I needed answers. I headed east, slow, careful, only driving during the day, avoiding mirrors, ignoring strangers, keeping my thoughts tight and small so it couldn't use them. And somewhere in the mountains of New Mexico, I found her again, the woman in the Winnebago. She was parked at a tiny overlook, alone, no other rigs, just her and the road and the kind of silence that had learned patience. She saw me before I even stepped out of the cab. "You look thinner," she said. "Inside or out?" I asked. She didn't answer, just poured me a cup of bitter black coffee and handed me a small box. "What is it?" I asked. "A way out," she said. "But it only works once." Inside was a reel-to-reel tape, old, dusty, hand-labeled in jagged script. Shh, the original sound. I didn't ask questions, didn't want to ruin it with logic, just nodded and took it. She smiled, barely, and said, "You're not the first, you won't be the last, but you've lasted longer than most." That night, I parked on a plateau overlooking a dried-up lake bed. No lights for miles, no service. Just stars, my breath, and that old tape player I'd kept from my granddad's tool shed. I threaded the reel, pressed play. What came out wasn't music, wasn't speech. It was primordial, like the world being born, like bones scraping against the womb of the earth, and underneath it so faint you'd miss it if you blinked too hard, was my own heartbeat, real time, my rhythm, outside of me, a tether. And as I listened, something shifted, not in the air, in me. Like I'd been off kilter for months without knowing it, and this was the first time I'd heard my own frequency again. And for a brief burning moment, I felt whole. The thing inside me screamed, not in sound, but in resistance. It tried to bury itself deeper, to claw into some hidden place it could hide. But I kept the tape running, held it to my chest, breathed in the pulse. That's how I got free. Not by fighting, not by running, but by remembering who I was before it found me. Because that's what these things feed on, more than fear. Forgetting. I didn't throw the reel away, didn't burn it, smash it, or bury it under concrete like some final act of denial. I kept it, wrapped in canvas, sealed in a box, tucked into the deepest compartment under the floorboards. Not because I planned to use it again, but because one day, someone else might need it more than I did. That's the thing no one tells you about freedom. It doesn't mean forgetting, it means remembering with purpose. And I remembered everything. From that point on, I drove differently. No more endless highways just to outrun the dark. No more back roads just to chase the thrill of isolation. I picked places with intention. Campgrounds, and with stories. Communities on the fringe. Small RV parks that other travelers avoided because of bad energy or strange rumors. Places where people whispered about lights or shadows or voices coming from the hookups at night. And I'd park, stay, and listen. Not to the land, not to the ghosts, but to the people. Because if there's one thing this road has taught me, it's this. We don't survive what haunts us by pretending it's not there. We survive by sharing it. I started meeting others. People who looked like they hadn't slept in weeks, people who had duct tape over their mirrors or never left their rig at night. One guy in Wyoming had looped barbed wire around his RV and carved a cross into every window. Said his wife vanished into the floor one night while he was parked at a KOA in Utah, and the only thing he heard was her voice on the walkie-talkie 2 hours later, coming from the woods. Another woman in Florida never stayed in one park longer than 2 days. She said the power poles were watching her, and I believe her. I've seen one blink. None of these people were crazy. They were just farther in than most. Some of them were past the point of rescue. But others, they still had questions, still had hope. And I'd sit with them over campfires or greasy diner coffee and tell them what I knew. Not the answers, just the patterns, the rules. Rule 1, if it feels like something's waiting for you when you arrive, it probably is. Don't stay. Rule 2, Never trust someone who appears too friendly in a place where no one else will talk to you. That's not how real campers work. Rule 3. When your RV's electronics start glitching, don't assume it's the solar. Spirits run off memory. Technology just reflects it. Rule 4. If you find a second version of your own rig parked nearby, leave. Do not approach. Do not try to open the door. It's not a glitch. It's an invitation. Rule 5. Always trust the dog. Every person I shared those with looked at me like I just named the thing behind their nightmares. In some cases, I had. It's strange. The more I gave away my story, the less it owned me. I wasn't cured. I wasn't untouched, but I was anchored. And that anchor saved me more than once. There was a night in Louisiana when I pulled into a fog-soaked pull-through and saw something standing in the glow of the park's sodium light. It looked human, moved like a shadow stretched too thin. It didn't speak, didn't move, just watched. I made tea, set it outside the door, spoke my name aloud just once, then went inside and didn't look again. In the morning, the cup was empty, and something had left a tooth on the step. This life, the RV, the road, the endless motion, it sells you on freedom. But there's a truth underneath the asphalt, buried beneath the brochures and van life reels. Freedom doesn't come from escaping something. It comes from learning how to walk beside it without losing yourself. I've met families who broke down in the desert and walked 12 miles barefoot in the dark because the RV felt wrong. I've met couples who refused to camp within 5 miles of a river because the voices always call from the water. And I've met solo travelers who've lost more than their way. They've lost time, whole months, gone, replaced by scars and dreams and a feeling they can never quite explain. But you talk to them long enough and the shape starts to come into view. A pattern, not a monster, not a ghost, something older, something that's always been in motion, just like us, riding the same roads, stopping at the same sites, learning how we think, how we react, how we cope. And when it finds a crack, grief, guilt, loneliness, trauma, it slips in and tests you. You don't pass those tests with strength. You pass them with memory, by knowing where you came from, by choosing who you are, even when the shadows try to rewrite it, and by listening, really listening to the stories of others who've seen the same thing. That's why I started recording these encounters, not for views, not for fame, but because I know someone out there, someone watching this, has seen something they can't explain, felt something they've never said out loud, woken up with dirt on their shoes and no memory of walking outside, and they think they're crazy. They're not. They're just on the road, the real one, the one beneath the maps and the apps and the apps and the campground brochures, the one that remembers you and waits. There was one more encounter I haven't talked about, not because I forgot, but because some truths feel heavier than others. It happened last fall, somewhere in northern Arizona, a stretch of highway that looked like it hadn't seen a maintenance crew in a decade. I was chasing cooler weather, trying to outrun a heat wave that had left the desert blistered and mean. The map said there was a free BLM campsite just off a ridge, easy access, supposedly popular with rock climbers and stargazers. When I arrived, the dirt road split like a vein. One path led to a gravel loop with 2 campers already there. The other dipped into a ravine thick with trees and shade. I didn't hesitate, took the shaded path, felt the temperature drop 10 degrees as I eased the RV between leaning pines and dense brush. No one else down there, not even footprints. Just a stillness, a quiet that didn't feel restful, more like something had just left or was watching. But I'd been through enough to know that fear can wear a dozen different faces. So I parked, leveled out, and made dinner. Night came fast. No stars, just thick cloud cover and a wind that barely touched the branches above. I was halfway through a chapter of some paperback when the smell hit me. Rotten milk, warm metal, damp earth. I checked the fridge, nothing spoiled. Opened the sink, no clog, but it got stronger. I stepped outside, flashlight in hand. The beam hit nothing but trees and brush and the shine of my own taillights. And then I heard it, a rustling. Heavy, about 20 feet away. Not fast like a deer. not padded like a bear. This was deliberate, crunching, slow, testing each step like something with legs and a mind of its own, the kind of sound you don't run from because running invites the chase. So I backed toward the RV door, smooth and steady, and said loud enough to carry, just passing through. The sound stopped, and in that stillness, I swear to you, I heard breathing, not close, not human, just present. I locked up, shut the blinds, sat at the dinette table with the flashlight off and every hair on my body alert. And that's when the hit, on the roof, followed by another and another. It wasn't footsteps, it wasn't hail, it was knocking. 3, spaced out, then silence, 3 more. Heavier, like something, wanted to be invited in but didn't know how to ask. I didn't move, didn't scream, I just listened. And then came the whisper. Not outside, not on the roof, inside, just behind the bathroom door. I stood slowly, grabbed the flashlight, creaked the door open. Nothing. But the air was wrong. Still and heavy, like the inside of a cave. And every surface, the mirror, the sink, the window, was fogged, not from steam, from breath. I left that site before dawn, didn't wait for coffee, didn't check the tires, just started the engine and backed out blind through branches and gravel until I hit asphalt. 2 days later, I was camped 300 miles north in a Walmart parking lot under neon lights and traffic noise. Safe, or so I thought. That night, I checked the bathroom again and carved into the fogged mirror, just faintly, like a child's finger had traced it days ago, were the words, "Still following." I don't tell you that to scare you. I tell you because that kind of thing happens. Not just to the paranoid, not just to the unlucky, but to anyone who lives on the road long enough, listens hard enough, stays still enough to hear what most try to ignore. This country's campgrounds are full of stories we bury under picnic tables and fire rings. Every empty tent pad, someone once ran from it in the middle of the night. Every closed-off loop, it wasn't flood damage, it was something else. And every friendly smile from the rig next door might be real, might not. But here's the truth I've come to know deep in my bones. You can keep going, even after the bad nights, even after the whispers, even after the road tries to take something from you. What matters is that you choose, that you make this life yours, with awareness, with respect, with memory, because the road remembers you too. And if you honor it, if you learn from it, sometimes it watches your back. Sometimes the same wind that carried the voices also clears them. Sometimes the same shadows that followed you one year won't come near the next. Not out of fear, but because you've changed. You've earned their distance. You've become something they fear. The last time I felt truly afraid, it wasn't because of something I saw. It was because of what I almost ignored. It was a small RV park outside a forgotten town in Nebraska, the kind of place built around a grain silo and a broken jukebox. I pulled in late, just needing a place to plug in, dump tanks, and sleep. There were maybe 4 other rigs. Most looked abandoned. One had vines growing up the wheels. Another had a screen door hanging by one hinge, creaking back and forth even though there was no wind. The old man at the office barely looked up from his newspaper, just slid a clipboard across the counter and muttered, "Take lot 7. I should have left then, not because of how he looked or what he said, but because of how quiet it was. I've camped alone in the Mojave, slept through mountain lightning storms and heard wolves circle my van outside Yellowstone. But this was a quiet that pressed inward, like sound itself was afraid to move. Lot 7 was between 2 overgrown RVs, both with drawn blinds and faded stickers. I set up quick. No water hookup. Power worked. But the ground, it felt wrong, too soft, like the dirt had been turned not long ago. I didn't cook, just made a sandwich, cracked a beer, and tried to watch something dumb to unwind. But I kept hearing it. Knocking. Soft, rhythmic, from next door. But no lights, no footsteps. Just that knock, knock, knock. I shut the window, drew the blinds, convinced myself it was the breeze or a loose shutter. But then I went to wash the plate, and I saw her. A woman, middle-aged maybe, standing in the lot next to mine just beyond the reach of the porch light. Her hair was tangled, her nightgown stained, her eyes huge, locked on me through the side window, not blinking, not moving, just watching. And I opened the door a crack and called out, "Are you okay? Do you need help?" No response, just silence. Then finally, in a voice so thin I almost thought I imagined it, she said, "He buried me here." I froze, swore I'd misheard, swore she must be confused. I stepped onto the RV step, flashlight in hand, beam trembling across gravel and grass, but she was gone. No footsteps, no sound, just the breeze picking up like it had been waiting for my doubt. I walked to the next lot, nothing but dust. The RV next door, empty, padlocked, rusted shut. The grass where she'd stood, pressed down in the shape of bare feet. I didn't sleep that night, didn't dare. At first light I packed up, dumped my tanks without even looking at the gauge, and turned back onto the highway without saying goodbye to anyone. Not the man in the office. Not the woman who watched me leave from the tree line, because yes, she was there. Same nightgown, same eyes. But this time, she was smiling. And behind her, barely visible in the shifting dawn, was a row of wooden crosses, each with names, dates, and lot numbers, including 7. I don't tell that story to creep you out. I tell it because it taught me something that changed everything. Trust your instincts, even when they seem ridiculous. Even when the rational voice in your head says, there's no way this is real. Because out here, on the road, the border between reality and nightmare isn't always where we think it is. I've met travelers who've had to change their rigs because something followed them. I've met people who never camped near water after what they heard whispering across the lake. I've seen children stare at trees like the trees were talking back. And I've felt the road itself shift like it was warning me. These aren't urban legends. These are truths whispered between the lines of campground reviews and filtered Instagram posts. Truths you only hear if you're really listening. So why keep going? Why keep camping? Why sleep in places where the night might press against the walls of your RV like it's breathing? Because there's something deeper than fear out here. Something older, wiser, sacred. It's in the way the mountains hold silence, the way the desert sings at night, the way certain campsites feel like memory and warning all at once. The fear, it teaches you, sharpens you, makes you pay attention, not just to danger, but to life, to every sunset that looks like it's bleeding, to every bird call that breaks the silence just when you thought it was permanent, to every stranger whose kindness feels like salvation after a stretch of bad luck. The road is unsettling, yes, but it's also honest. It doesn't lie to you. It doesn't pretend things are okay when they're not. It shows you what you're made of. And sometimes it shows you things no one else would believe, but that doesn't make them less real. That just makes you stronger for surviving them. So if you're sitting there now wondering whether to chase this life, this wild, ghost-haunted, wind-lashed life on wheels, don't ask if it'll be safe. Ask if you're ready to be changed, because the road doesn't care about your plans. It only cares about who you become when the sun sets and the woods start whispering and the knock comes soft and slow on the side of your rig. You don't run, you don't scream, you listen. And then you drive, not away from it, but through it. Because this is the truth of RV camping no one tells you. Sometimes the scariest things you encounter are exactly the things that lead you back to yourself. I've always believed that the desert holds secrets better than any forest or mountain range. It doesn't try to hide them behind thick underbrush or bury them beneath snowdrifts. No, the desert lets them sit in the open, waiting for you to notice. It doesn't rush. And that's what I felt the second we crossed into Joshua Tree in our old VW Westphalia, like we were stepping into a place that wasn't waiting on our clock. My name's Adam, 34. I'd been traveling with my partner Jess for just under a year at that point. We weren't the Instagram couple type. We didn't do this for likes or van life validation. We did it because staying in one place started to feel like death. Something about motion, even if it led nowhere, kept us feeling alive. We'd camped in state parks, forests, lakesides, even one old missile silo turned ghost town near Montana. But Joshua Tree, it had this draw. People talked about it like a spiritual axis, a thin place, some called it, where the veil between things wears a little thinner. I'd heard stories, weird ones, strange compass behavior, disappearing hikers, eerie light shows, but I chalked it up to desert lore, heat stroke and psychedelics. We weren't even supposed to stay that night, just a pit stop, but plans change. You see, the sun was already bleeding into the horizon when we rolled up to the BLM land just north of the national park boundary. Free camping, no cell service, just flat desert and clusters of those alien trees twisting toward the sky like ancient dancers frozen mid-motion. The air felt brittle. Dry, sure, but still in a way that makes your ears ring. No wind, no bugs, just silence. We parked facing west, our usual ritual, sunrises behind us, sunsets ahead. The van creaked as it settled on its suspension, as if exhaling after the long drive. Jess jumped out, already pulling out our tiny camp chairs, her boots kicking up the powdery earth. "This spot feels weird," she said, half smiling. Good weird. I should have trusted that she noticed it first. We made dinner, canned lentils, some old tortillas, and watched the last light turn everything a muted red. No other vans in sight. Just our Westie, 2 folding chairs, and that surreal desert stillness stretching in all directions. I don't remember what time we went to sleep. That's important. Not just because I'm trying to recall it now, but because even then, the awareness of time felt slippery. We didn't have signal. Our watches had been acting funny all day. My digital Casio kept blinking 12 like it had been reset. Jess's analog watch ticked forward in stuttering jumps like it was drunk. We brushed it off, assumed batteries, magnetism, or something about being remote. But even then, something about the way night felt off, like a film reel skipping frames. One moment it was dusk, then bam, pitch dark. Jess woke me up around 3 a.m., or at least she said it was 3. Her voice was low, controlled, but I could hear the strain in it. "Do you hear that?" I sat up, groggy, heart already pounding before I even listened. Nothing. I mean nothing. No coyotes. No wind. Not even the hum of our fridge, which should have been running. "I thought I heard footsteps," she whispered. Crunching, like gravel. My first instinct was to open the side curtain, but something stopped me. It was like my hand got halfway there and my body vetoed it. A cold roll spread across my chest. "Maybe someone else pulled in late," I whispered, though my voice cracked on it. She shook her head. "It wasn't a car. I would have heard an engine." We sat there for a while, eyes wide in the dark, waiting for another sound, but nothing came. Eventually, I must have dozed again, and that's when it started. When I woke up again, the light outside was already harsh. Desert sun, full bore. I looked at the clock, 8:17 a.m., but Jess wasn't in the van. I got dressed fast and opened the side door, squinting into the glare. She stood about 50 feet away, staring at the same tree, not touching it, not moving, just watching. "Hey," I called out, still groggy. "Everything okay?" She turned slowly and smiled, but it wasn't quite her usual smile. It was too slow, too deliberate, like she was trying to match my pace. "Yeah," she said. I think I just got up earlier than I thought." That didn't make sense. Jess is a heavy sleeper, always has been. And her voice, it had this hollowness, like a slight echo in it. I told myself it was just the open landscape, the silence playing tricks. We made coffee, ate breakfast, packed up to leave, only we didn't. Because when I tried to turn the key in the ignition, nothing happened. Not even a click. The battery wasn't dead. The radio still lit up. Lights worked, but the van wouldn't start. Not even a cough. I popped the back, checked the wiring, the starter. I'd been through this dance before. The VW's temperamental, but she usually gives me something. Something. "Feels like we should stay another night," Jess said casually, watching the clouds roll in from the west. I stopped what I was doing. "What?" She shrugged. "We're already here. Maybe the van needs rest. Maybe we do." I was about to push back, but something in her tone, the same detached ease, made me pause. Jess was intuitive, but not flaky, and the words, "the van needs rest," stuck with me in a strange way. That day passed like molasses. Time crawled, then jumped. The sun flickered through clouds that moved strangely in geometric shapes, almost, like they followed routes, not wind. That night I didn't sleep at all. The knocking came again, but not footsteps this time. It was tapping on the roof in rhythmic threes. Tap, 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 then silence, then tap, tap, tap. Jess lay beside me, her eyes open. "Do you hear that?" she whispered. I nodded, holding my breath. This time I moved the curtain. Nothing outside. Just desert lit by moonlight so bright it looked artificial. But the tapping continued, even as I stared out, even as I pressed my face to the glass. Tap, tap, tap. I climbed down from the bunk and opened the sliding door. The tapping stopped. Nothing on the roof, no animals, no branches, just the hiss of sand shifting in the wind. But then the sky blinked. I know how insane that sounds, but it blinked. For a split second, the stars all went dark, like a shutter over the world closed, then reopened. And when it did, the trees had moved. 2 of them. Closer to us, about 10 feet closer. Joshua trees don't move, but these had. I was certain of it. Jess saw it too, her breath caught in her throat. We didn't speak. We just got back into the van, locked the doors, and waited. Morning didn't come gradually. It snapped into place. 1 second it was dark, then light. No twilight, no soft glow, just instant daytime. Jess looked at me, her face pale. "We need to leave." I nodded, tried the ignition again, and this time the engine roared to life like nothing had ever been wrong. I didn't ask questions. I threw it into gear, and we drove. Fast, unthinking, until we hit the road again and finally picked up a weak signal. But here's where it breaks even more. It wasn't the next morning. It was 4 days later. My mom had left 6 missed calls. Emails had stacked up. The GPS tagged our location, but not our movement. It was like we'd been paused, or worse, overwritten. And Jess still wasn't acting right. I watched her as I drove, hands tight on the wheel, trying not to white knuckle it, trying not to let the desert heat press into my skin and crack me open. Jess sat stiffly in the passenger seat, staring out the window, not blinking much, not humming like she usually did when we drove, not talking, not even watching the road, just staring. We passed signs for Yucca Valley and Joshua Tree proper, and I kept telling myself, once we're out, she'll go back to normal. Once we're back among people, she'll shake it off. But I didn't believe it. Not really. Not after what happened back there. Not after the sky blinked and the trees moved and time skipped like a scratched record. We pulled into a gas station, the kind with faded signage, 2 working pumps, and a shack that sold warm water bottles and melted candy bars. I got out to fuel up, left the engine running. "Want anything?" I asked. She didn't answer. "Jess?" Slowly, she turned toward me. "No, I'm not hungry. You should hurry." I took the hint. Went inside, bought a couple of energy drinks and some jerky, just for the motion of it. But when I handed the cash to the woman behind the counter, she squinted at me and said, "You boys just come from the north?" I blinked. "What?" "BLM land, near Cap Rock, up by the back entrance." I hesitated. "Yeah, we camped a couple nights. Why?" Her eyes narrowed a fraction, like she was measuring me. "People go out there and come back different." I half laughed, unsure whether this was local color or just small-town weirdness. "Different how?" "Like they left pieces of themselves behind," she said plainly, "or brought back things that don't belong here." That stuck with me, not just because of the words, but the way she said it. Not like she was warning me, like she was stating a fact. I got back in the van and pulled away without saying another word. We drove east for hours, cutting across the Mojave, hoping that the further we got, the more that strangeness would slough off us like old skin. But it didn't. At night, Jess talked in her sleep, and not in mumbles either. She spoke in full sentences. Flat. Emotionless. "It's not done with us. I saw it between the cracks. They don't know time like we do." One night I recorded her. Played it back in the morning. She denied saying any of it. Genuinely looked confused. Hurt, even. Why would I say that? That's not me. You know me. And I did know her. I knew her rhythms and thoughts, and that look she got when she was lying, she wasn't. Whatever was speaking through her, it wasn't Jess. Still, I convinced myself she was just rattled, that we both were. We needed a break from camping, a break from the isolation, from sleeping in the van, chasing sunsets and chasing silence. So we booked a cheap Airbnb outside Flagstaff and tried to forget. But that's the thing about time. Once it slips its leash, it doesn't just go back into the cage. We'd wake up at 2 p.m. thinking it was 7 a.m. Clocks blinked out and came back with the wrong date. Phones froze on maps we hadn't used in days. I tried calling my brother one night, and he picked up and said, "Didn't we talk this morning?" But I hadn't spoken to him in a week. I checked my call log. The call was there. Same timestamp, a full conversation I didn't remember having. And Jess, she started drawing things. I'd find napkins covered in little spirals, loops, geometrical patterns that didn't quite align with anything Euclidean. They looked like crop circles or magnetic fields sketched by someone blindfolded. Once she drew a Joshua tree, but it wasn't just a tree. It had eyes on the branches, long, lidless things staring in every direction. When I asked her why she drew it, she stared at the paper like she didn't remember doing it at all. I threw that one away. We left the Airbnb after 5 days. We told ourselves we'd shake it off, that it was some kind of shared psychosis, desert fever maybe, a spiritual hangover, something that would wear off with distance and noise and civilization. So we drove up through Nevada, then into Oregon. Lush, green, alive. Everything the desert wasn't. Jess started smiling again. Making eye contact, she even joked about the weirdness. It felt good, felt normal, until we found another Joshua tree in Oregon, on a back road east of Bend. They don't grow there. That's not their range, not their biome. But there it was, bent and twisted like a knuckle in the sand. Jess pulled over without a word, just stopped in the middle of the road and stared at it through the windshield. My throat tightened. "We're not stopping here," I said quickly. "We're not going near it." She blinked, like she'd just woken up. "Right? Yeah, sorry." We kept driving, but that was the crack, the fracture that let everything back in. The dreams returned, so did the time loops. But the scariest part? It stopped scaring us. We got used to it. That's what no one tells you. The true horror isn't the panic. It's when the panic turns to routine, when you start writing down your own memories each morning because you can't trust what day it is, when you set timers to check that the sun rises at the right speed, when you pass the same gas station twice in 2 different states. I started to believe that part of us never left that patch of land, that maybe we'd stepped out of our timeline and into some side corridor. And the worst part was, I wanted to go back because something in that place felt clearer. Like time wasn't broken. We were just finally seeing it the way it really was. Not linear, not neat. Just coiling and uncoiling, folding in on itself. Jess wouldn't admit it, but I could tell she felt the same. It's why one morning, 6 weeks after we'd left Joshua Tree, I woke to find her already dressed, keys in hand. "I want to see it again," she said softly. "Jess, I need to." So we went. Back to California, back through Barstow, back to the gravel road leading to that free campsite on the northern edge of the park. And when we pulled up to that same flat stretch of desert, I swear to God it looked exactly the same. Same tire tracks, same rock we'd used to hold down the tarp, same trees in the exact same wrong positions. We hadn't gone in a loop, we'd never left. I stepped out of the van and just stood there for a moment, trying to figure out what felt off, even though everything looked exactly the same. It was the stillness. Not silence. Stillness. Like the wind itself was holding its breath. Jess was already ahead of me, walking slowly toward the fire pit we'd dug. She moved like she was in a trance, and I didn't call after her. Something in me, something old and survival-based, told me not to make sudden sounds, not to interrupt whatever rhythm we'd stepped back into. I followed her. The fire pit was there, the same semi-burned logs in the exact shape we'd left them, the same dented beer can next to the largest rock, rusted just a bit more. It was like no time had passed at all. But we knew better. I crouched down and picked up the beer can. It was warm to the touch, like it had been sitting in the sun this whole time. I held it for a moment, unsure why that felt so significant. And then I realized I'd crushed this can before we left. I remembered it. Now it was intact again. Jess was standing by the edge of the site, eyes on the trees. "They moved again," she said. "Jess," I murmured, barely above a whisper, "we shouldn't be here." "They moved again," she repeated, like I hadn't said anything. And she was right. The closest Joshua tree, the one with the trunk shaped like a hunched-over figure, was now 20, maybe 30 feet to the left of where it had been. No footprints, no tire tracks, no signs of disturbance in the dirt, just moved. I stepped closer to her, the hairs on my arms bristling. The sunlight hit the back of my neck and felt too heavy, like it had weight. "Do you feel that?" I asked. She nodded. "The gravity's wrong." And it was. It was subtle, but unmistakable, like the pull was slightly to the left instead of straight down. My balance was off. My stomach shifted like I had just stepped off a treadmill. We didn't speak again for a while. We sat down where the van's shadow fell long across the ground, and we just watched. Like if we looked away, even for a second, things would shift again, and we'd never catch them in the act. And eventually, they did. Not all automatically, but in that slow, awful way you only notice if you've been staring at the same thing for too long. The sun dipped lower. Too fast. The van's shadow lengthened in ways that didn't make sense, curved where it should have been straight, bent around things that weren't there. And the air started to hum, not with sound exactly, with vibration, like standing too close to high voltage lines, like the molecules themselves were oscillating just out of sync with your own. Jess stood up slowly. "It's happening again," she said, and then the world blinked. That's the only way I can describe it. It blinked. For half a second, the trees flickered like a stuttering video feed. The sky turned a dusky green, the ground rippled like heat off pavement, and then everything snapped back. But not quite right. My watch said 3:12. Jess's phone said 9:04. The van's dashboard clock, 11:58. And then, worse than the time, we noticed something was missing. Our footprints. Gone. The beer can I'd picked up, now in the fire pit again, crushed this time. The van shifted 10 feet to the right. We hadn't moved it. Jess stared at it, and I saw something in her eyes that terrified me more than the flickering sky, more than the vibrating air, more than the time skips or the moving trees. I saw recognition, like she'd been here before, not just a few weeks ago, not just this last trip. Before. "I remember this," she whispered, "but not from when we were here, from before I was me." I grabbed her arm, not roughly, but firm enough that she'd feel the pressure, the now-ness of it. "You're Jess. You're my Jess. We're leaving. Now." But she didn't move. "I don't think we can." And then the light changed again. It didn't go dark. It went sideways. Everything took on a blue tint, like a filter had been thrown over the world. The sound of the wind returned, but backwards, literally reversed, like someone was sucking air through a VHS tape. And then, voices. They didn't come from a direction. They came from everywhere, from the rocks, the trees, the sky. Not human voices, not alien either. Something in between, like language stripped of meaning, all rhythm and tone and intention. And Jess stepped toward them. I held onto her arm, but she turned and looked at me, calm, serene, and said, "It's okay. I think I know what I am now." I didn't let go. "Stop, Jess, stop." But her body was already slipping through mine, not metaphorically, physically. She phased through my grip like fog, like she was no longer subject to the same laws of matter. And in that moment, something cracked inside me. I screamed, not just out of fear, out of grief, out of helpless, gut-twisting realization that I was losing her to something I couldn't even name. And as she stepped forward, as her feet stopped making prints in the dust, the blue light pulsed. Once, then again, then everything went white. When I woke up, I was in the van, alone. No Jess. No sound, no blue tint, just morning light, crisp and gold and cutting through the windshield. I stumbled out of the van, calling her name, over and over. Nothing, no sign of her, not even one single footprint. And worst of all, my watch said it was the same day we arrived. I wanted to believe it was all a dream, some heat stroke-induced hallucination, a vivid breakdown of reality brought on by stress and dehydration. But I knew better. My throat wasn't dry. My mind wasn't racing the way it does when you wake from a nightmare. It was calm, deathly calm, like I'd been reset along with everything else. But not everything had reset. The beer can was gone. The fire pit looked freshly used, faint tendrils of ash still curling like they hadn't finished cooling. And worst of all, the driver's door to the van was open. I never leave it open. The passenger side, where Jess had slept, still had her blanket folded neatly on the seat. Her water bottle was missing, though. I checked under the cushions around the base of the bed in the back. Nothing. It was like she'd vanished cleanly, without a struggle, without a goodbye. I didn't pack up right away. I should have, but something inside me, maybe the same part of me that kept rationalizing the strange time slips and the flickering sky, still hoped she'd come back. I told myself she just walked off to take a picture, that she needed air. I waited until dusk. That's when I heard it again. Not the voices, not at first, footsteps, but not approaching ones. Not crunchy and tentative like a hiker or a ranger. These were soft, repetitive, measured, pacing, right outside the driver's side window. I froze. Then the whispering started, right by the windshield, less than a foot away, from something I couldn't see. A language I still can't describe. No consonants, just long, lilting breaths broken by soft clicks like tongue against teeth. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. It didn't stop. And then it started to mimic me. It copied my breath pattern, matched my shallow inhales with perfect timing. Then came the knock. 3 soft taps on the windshield just above the dashboard. I snapped. I turned the key, slammed the door shut, and threw the van into reverse so hard I nearly backed into a boulder. I didn't care. I peeled out, tires grinding the loose sand and gravel, fishtailing once before I found the dirt trail that led back to the main road. I didn't look back. Not once. Not until I hit the paved highway and felt asphalt humming beneath me again. Only then, in the safety of speed and movement, did I check the rear view. Nothing followed, but something was different. The landscape behind me, the Joshua trees, the rock formations, it all looked younger, like I'd driven out of the present and back into a desert that hadn't been touched by the last 50 years. Or maybe I had. Maybe that was the point. I didn't stop driving until I reached 29 Palms. I parked at a gas station and just sat there in the van with the engine idling. I didn't even get out to pump gas. I sat with the door locked, one hand on the wheel, one hand holding Jess's phone. Yeah, her phone was in the glove box, with a message on the screen I never saw her type. Don't come back for me. I'm not behind the glass anymore. No date, no timestamp, just the message. And the background image? It had changed. It used to be a photo of us in the van, grinning with iced coffee from a roadside stand in Oregon. Now it was the campsite. Our campsite. But the van was gone. The sky above it looked wrong too, like there were faces in the clouds. Not detailed, but shapes. Half familiar, stretched long and thin, mouthless and wide-eyed. I've shown it to friends. They say it's just a bad panorama glitch, a compression artifact. But I know what I saw. I didn't go home. I drove for days, aimless. Just kept moving, sleeping in truck stops or Walmart parking lots. I didn't want to be anywhere. The ground didn't feel solid. And now I avoided trees, desert, any place that felt like it might remember me. And still, sometimes, time doesn't work right. It's small things now. I'll blink and realize a podcast I'm listening to has skipped 10 minutes ahead without me touching anything. I'll check a receipt, and it'll say I paid for something 3 days from now. A waitress told me once, without hesitation, that I'd been in her diner last week. Same table, same van, but I was in Nevada that week, not Arizona, or so I thought. I've stopped trying to explain it to people. The ones who know, the other Volkswagen van lifers I've met in hushed corners of lonely highways, they don't need explanations. They've seen things too. Not all in Joshua Tree, some in Sedona, others along the lost coast, places where reality stretches thin like skin pulled over bone too tight. But Joshua Tree, that place is different. It doesn't just stretch time, it feeds on it, bends it, reshapes you until you don't remember what shape you started with. I think that's what happened to Jess. I think she remembered something ancient, something before identity, before separation, and I think it called her home. I don't think she's dead, not exactly, but she's not Jess anymore. She's part of it. Part of the hum and the blue light and the voices that whisper outside the windshield when you stay just a little too long. Every now and then I think about going back. I wonder if the trees would remember me, if the time skips would pick up where they left off, if I'd find her standing by the fire pit, still holding that beer can, still watching the sky flicker like it was waiting for a signal. But I never do, because deep down, I know. If I go back, I won't come out the same, and maybe I don't want to come out at all. But sometimes late at night, when the road feels endless and the stars flicker too slow, I think I already did go back. Not with my body, but with my mind. It's like a splinter stuck in my perception, a tiny fragment of Joshua Tree lodged somewhere in the folds of my awareness, a place where time still doesn't move right, where memories bend like light in heat and truth echoes just out of reach. You don't realize how fragile time is until you feel it slipping, until you wake up in a moment you swear you already lived, or never did, until your heart recognizes fear before your brain has words for it. People always ask me why I still travel, why I keep the van, why I stay on the road even after everything that had happened, and I never know how to answer them, because the truth is, I'm still looking for her. Not Jess, exactly, but the version of her that didn't leave. The version of me that didn't wait too long, didn't pretend the flickering sky meant nothing, didn't rationalize the unexplainable until it was too late. I'm looking for that feeling we had in the early days, that rush of freedom and adventure before we knew what kind of places were hiding in the folds of the world. But more than that, I'm trying to remember who I was before Joshua Tree changed me, before I stopped trusting stillness, before silence became a warning sign, before stars felt like eyes. And if you're hearing this, if you've ever been out there, parked under those strange, twisted trees, wondering why your watch doesn't match the sun, or why you feel like something's watching you from behind the rocks, get in the van, drive, don't wait for a sign, don't wait for the sky to flicker again, because some places don't let you leave once they've tasted your timeline. And some versions of you don't make it back. I've learned to live in the in-between now. Somewhere between past and future, between places that are real and places that feel real. I've seen too much to pretend the world is solid, but I've also learned that movement is survival, that staying still, mentally, physically, spiritually, is what gets people taken. You want to camp in your van? Good, do it, but do it awake, do it with intention. Don't just chase sunsets, watch how they set. Don't just enjoy the quiet, listen to what it's saying, and never, never ignore your instincts. They aren't just warning systems, they're memory. Echoes of things we've forgotten how to describe. Your gut knows when a place isn't right, even if your eyes can't see it yet. The desert doesn't lie, it just doesn't explain itself either. I don't have answers. I don't even know what I believe anymore. But I know this. Time is not guaranteed. Not its direction, not its meaning, not even its presence. There's a place in Joshua Tree where time doesn't work right, and if you ever stumble across it, whether by accident or invitation, you'll know. You won't feel scared at first. You'll feel curious, light, like something important is about to happen. And that's how it gets you, because some places don't use fear, they use wonder. And by the time you realize you're caught in it, that time isn't moving forward anymore, that you're living on loop or skipping hours or feeling older than you should, it's already too late. You're part of it now. You're written into the rocks, etched into the light, another echo waiting to be heard by the next camper who stays just a little too long. So if you love this life, this Volkswagen on the road life. If you cherish the early mornings, the dusty windows, the creak of your bed frame in the wind, keep driving, keep moving, because the only way to stay you out here is to never stop leaving and to always remember not every beautiful place wants you to go. Some want you to stay forever. I've always thought silence was peace. I grew up craving it, seeking out those rare moments when the world went still and the only thing I could hear was the sound of my own breath. But in Death Valley, I learned the hard way that silence is not always peace. Sometimes it's a warning. Sometimes it's a scream swallowed by the desert. My name is Hannah. I'm 35. My partner, Marcus, is 38. We've been full-timing in our RV for the last 3 years. Not influencers, not digital nomads chasing the sunset for social media likes, just two people trying to find some quiet after years of chaos. He lost his brother to addiction. I buried both parents in the same year. Grief sent us out onto the road, into the backcountry, trying to heal in the stillness. We made a pact early on: no tourist traps, no KOA campgrounds, no cell towers in sight. We wanted remoteness, the kind that makes your ears ring from lack of sound. So when Marcus suggested Death Valley in the middle of February, I didn't blink. It's off season, he said. We'll have the whole desert to ourselves. We found an obscure campsite just outside of Furnace Creek. Legal, dispersed camping, no hookups, no fees. Just a flat gravel turnout off an old dirt road tucked behind a line of low sandstone outcrops. BLM land, mostly ignored. No one else was there. The first night, we celebrated. Cooked on the fire pit, drank a little whiskey, let the darkness wrap around us like a heavy blanket. The stars were brutal in their clarity, like holes punched in the sky. You could hear the earth cooling down at night, shifting, creaking. We fell asleep with the windows cracked open, the RV barely stirring in the stillness. At 2:17 a.m., someone knocked on our door. Not loud, not frantic, just deliberate. 3 knocks, precise, rhythmic, then silence. I sat up straight in bed, heart slamming. I wasn't dreaming. I know the sound of a human knuckle on fiberglass. It wasn't the wind, wasn't a branch or a curious coyote brushing the side of the vehicle. This was intentional. Marcus was still half asleep. Probably nothing, he mumbled, rubbing his face. Desert shifts. Things settle. But I knew better. I grew up in Phoenix. I've camped in dry country all my life. And this sound, this knock, had weight behind it. Calculation. He climbed out of bed, grabbed the flashlight, peeked out through the side window. No footprints, no figures, just the yawning dark pressed against our RV like it was listening. He went outside anyway. I told him not to, whispered sharply, begged him to wait until morning. But he's stubborn, always has to verify things for himself. He swept the light over the gravel. Nothing. Not a track, not a shift in the dust. It was like no one had ever been there. But I swear I saw the skin drain from his face when he looked up at the back window, the one over the bed. When he came back inside, he didn't speak for a long time, just locked the doors. Double-checked the latches on all the windows. We slept with the lights on after that. Or tried to. The silence was too loud. We didn't talk about it the next morning. I think we were both hoping it was a fluke. Some auditory hallucination, a trick of nerves in a place where your breath dries out between words. But that night, it happened again. Same time. Same knock. 2:17 a.m. sharp. 3 slow, purposeful raps against the door. Nothing more. No voice, no shadow, just that terrible, deliberate rhythm. I didn't move. Marcus held my hand so tight it went numb. We didn't look out the windows. We didn't speak. We just sat there, frozen in the dim blue light of the cabin, listening to the nothing that came afterward. Again, no prints in the morning, no signs of a person. But this time, Marcus didn't argue when I said I wanted to move the RV. We drove 20 miles south, past Badwater Basin, down into a gravel wash where the mountains swallowed the sun before it even touched the horizon. Again, no one around. No campers, no rangers, no light pollution. Just that suffocating quiet. That night, I didn't sleep at all. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, ears straining. And at exactly 2:17 a.m., someone knocked again. Same cadence, 3 slow taps, but this time it wasn't at the door. It was on the window, the one just inches from my face. And this time it wasn't knuckles. It sounded like nails, dry, scraping, measured. I choked back a scream. Marcus leapt up, grabbed the flashlight, but I pulled him back. Don't look. Don't look, I whispered. Don't open anything. We sat there, paralyzed, until dawn bled over the valley. That morning, we packed up to leave. I wanted out of Death Valley. I wanted civilization, noise, anyone else. But the engine wouldn't turn over. Battery was fine, fuel full, no warning lights. But it was like the starter just wouldn't catch. We tried everything. Disconnected the battery, reset the breaker. Nothing. We were stranded in the middle of nowhere. No cell signal, no cars on the road. And somehow, in that choking stillness, it hit me. We were being watched, not just at night, not just when we heard the knock, always. Something was out there, waiting, tracking us, and now we couldn't leave. We spent the entire morning troubleshooting. Marcus climbed up onto the roof to check the solar array while I paced barefoot in the dust, staring out at the endless jagged ridgelines like they were closing in around us. The wind had picked up. It didn't howl. It hissed like sandpaper whispering over dry bone. No birds, no insects, just the creak of heat splitting the earth. The radio was useless. Total silence. We hadn't seen another Reich in over 48 hours, and even if someone came down that wash, they'd have to be looking for us on purpose. This wasn't a place you found by accident. Around noon, Marcus gave up. He stood beside me, sweat glistening on his temple, hands black with grease. We're going to have to hike, he said, not meeting my eyes. I saw a ranger outpost marked on the paper map, maybe 6-7 miles west. I nodded, but I didn't move, because I'd just noticed something behind the RV. There was a mark on the rear window, a smear, faint but clear. A long vertical line, like something had dragged its fingers downward slowly, each line evenly spaced, like the hand was too large, too deliberate to be human. I didn't tell Marcus. Not yet. I didn't have the language for it. Instead, I told him I'd stay with the RV in case someone passed by. He could make better time without me. I handed him one of the radios even though we both knew they wouldn't work, and watched him disappear over the ridgeline with nothing but a water bladder and a knife on his belt. The hours stretched. The heat pressed against the windows like a weight. Time dripped. The sun didn't move. It loomed, bloated and bloodshot through a yellowed sky. And then, around dusk. The knocks started early. One knock. Not at the door. Not even at the window. But underneath the RV. I held my breath. The knock came again, slower. Closer to the wheel well this time, then nothing. I gripped the steering wheel even though it couldn't take me anywhere. My palms were slick. I started whispering to myself, anything to fill the air. It's just thermal shift, just heat contracting metal. It's just the ground settling. But I didn't believe it, because I was starting to remember something Marcus told me a long time ago, a story his brother once swore was true. Back when they were kids growing up in a trailer near the Mojave, they'd heard stories of an old man who used to walk between the ghost towns at night. He'd knock 3 times on your door, never said a word, never moved unless you looked at him. Marcus said the ones who looked never came back. Back then, it sounded like a drug-fueled hallucination, just dessert lore. But now it felt like a memory with teeth, like something had followed him from childhood, something that had finally found us. Night fell. No moon, just the bruised shimmer of stars bleeding light over the cracked ground. At 2:17 a.m., right on time, the knocking returned. This time louder, angrier. 3 pounding thuds against the RV door. So hard I felt the whole frame shift on its suspension. I couldn't breathe. I curled up on the floor, every instinct screaming not to look, not to speak. I squeezed my eyes shut until tears streamed sideways down my face. I mouthed Marcus's name over and over, and then I heard it. A voice, not outside, inside. Low, rasping, not speech, just breathing, heavy, ragged, coming from the bathroom. The door was ajar. I didn't remember leaving it that way. The breathing stopped the second I looked. Cold air poured into my lungs like I'd been drowning. I crawled to the bathroom and swung the door open, heart trying to beat its way out of my ribs. Empty. Mirror fogged slightly, as if someone had just stood in front of it. But the RV was boiling inside. Nothing should have fogged. I stayed up until daylight, clutching a wrench and reciting my childhood address in a loop, grounding myself to anything I knew was real. And then, just as the sun broke the ridgeline, I saw Marcus. Or I thought I did. He was walking back up the wash, stiff and strange, like his joints weren't bending right. His arms hung a little too far from his sides, and his head tilted just a few degrees too far left. But I ran out to meet him. I was halfway across the gravel when I stopped cold, because his boots weren't making a sound. Not on the rocks, not on the brittle salt crust. His steps were silent, and when he saw me, he didn't smile, didn't raise his hand or call my name. He just stopped and stood there, watching. My mouth went dry. I took a step back, then another, and as I did, he turned, sharp, mechanical, and walked behind a rock outcrop. I ran after him, but when I got there, the space was empty. No footprints, no Marcus, just heat haze and the slow churn of my own panic. When I returned to the RV, something was waiting for me on the step. A small weathered coin. Silver. Mexican peso, 1942. Marcus had one just like it, his brother's. He wore it on a cord around his neck every day. Only now, it wasn't on the cord. It was warm when I picked it up, like it had just been in someone's hand. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Not after seeing whatever that was. Not after picking up that coin. By the time the sun dragged itself overhead, I was dehydrated, half delirious, and chewing on the inside of my cheek just to feel something that made sense. I stayed inside the RV all day with the blinds drawn. I kept imagining Marcus's face, except the eyes weren't his. They were just blank, flat, reflective, like the desert was staring back at me through him. It was late afternoon when I started hearing footsteps again, but this time they weren't outside. They were above me, on the roof, measured, heavy. I pressed myself against the kitchen cabinets, listening as they crossed from one end of the rig to the other. I couldn't move, couldn't even cry. I just waited for the sound of the roof vent opening, waited for fingers to curl down through the fan blades, for a face to press against the skylight like a photograph warped by heat. But nothing came in. The steps just stopped. After a while, I crawled up into the cab, shaking, forced myself to look through the windshield. No one there. No marks on the glass, no prints in the dirt. Just the late-day light slicing across the gravel and those twisted Joshua trees standing crooked in the distance. I stayed like that until dark. Didn't move, didn't eat. And when the sun finally fell behind the ridge and the wind dropped out completely, I knew what was coming. The first knock came at 2:17 a.m., exactly. This time, I was ready. I stood in the middle of the RV with the wrench in one hand and a flashlight in the other. I didn't blink. Didn't speak. I told myself if I could just face it, if I could just see it, I might understand what it wanted. The second knock came 30 seconds later, window level, passenger side. Still, I didn't move. The third knock wasn't a knock at all. It was a whisper. Right behind me. I spun around. The flashlight caught something, for just a fraction of a second, in the hallway. Something tall, impossibly thin, with joints that bent wrong and skin that wasn't skin at all, but paper. Dry, wrinkled, peeling. And its head, oh God, its head. It was wrong. Too long, its mouth opened wide, almost unhinging, as if to swallow light itself. And then it vanished. The flashlight blinked out. I dropped to my knees and screamed into my own hands until my throat burned. Whatever this thing was, it wasn't just knocking. It was learning, testing. It wanted me to be alone. It wanted Marcus gone. And deep down, I knew, somehow, it already had him. When the sun finally came up, I stepped outside. The air was still. No birds, no wind, just the sound of my own footsteps crunching over gravel. I didn't know where I was going. I just walked, away from the RV, away from that damned stretch of barren dirt. I followed the same direction Marcus had taken days earlier, hoping maybe, by some miracle, I'd find him. Or maybe I just didn't want to die in that tin box. It took hours, but I found the ranger outpost. Or what was left of it. It had been burned out years ago, maybe decades. Just blackened concrete steps and a charred sign that said Furnace Creek Station. But there was something on the steps, a notebook. I picked it up, hands trembling. The first few pages were scorched, but I could still make out the handwriting inside. Dozens of entries dated sporadically, some as old as the 1960s. Every one of them talked about the hour, 2:17 a.m. Each entry had different details. A woman hearing footsteps on her camper roof, a hunter finding a baby's cry echoing across a salt flat, a prospector who claimed his horse turned against him and wouldn't stop staring into the sand. But the pattern was always the same. 3 nights, 3 knocks. Then something vanishes. Somebody disappears. Sometimes it's a person, sometimes a memory, a piece of yourself. But after the 3rd night, something is taken. And the last entry, it was dated 3 weeks ago. It just said, if you hear the knock, you can't leave until it's done. You're marked. You carry it with you, even if you run. That's when I understood this wasn't some local legend. This was real. A pattern stretching back decades, maybe longer. The desert wasn't empty. It was full of things we were never meant to disturb. I dropped the notebook and turned around. The sky had darkened while I read, and standing about 20 yards from me was Marcus. But not Marcus. He was still. Too still. The wind picked up and his hair didn't move, his shirt didn't ripple, his face didn't blink. I didn't say his name. I didn't speak. I just backed away slowly. I didn't turn. I didn't run. Because I could feel deep in my bones that if I turned my back on him, I wouldn't make it back to the RV. I walked in reverse the whole way. Even after he disappeared again into the heat shimmer, I didn't stop. Not until I locked the RV door behind me. The coin was gone. The wrench, too. In their place, a single small handprint on the inside of the bathroom mirror. I didn't move the rest of that day. Didn't eat, didn't drink, didn't speak. I just sat in the RV with every window covered, every cabinet latched, every flashlight within arm's reach. The desert had gone quiet again. Too quiet. That crushing kind of silence that presses into your ears and makes your own heartbeat sound too loud, like it's not supposed to be there. That night, I knew it would be the 3rd, the final night. I couldn't stop shaking, couldn't stop thinking about that phrase in the notebook. 3 knocks, then something vanishes. Marcus was already gone. What else could it want? Me? My mind? My soul? I locked the doors again. Not that it ever seemed to matter. And I sat in the hallway between the cab and the kitchenette, back against the fridge, wrench in my lap, flashlight resting across my knees. I stared at the digital clock on the stove. I watched the minutes crawl. 2:16 a.m. I felt it before I heard it. A shift in the air pressure, like the whole valley took a breath in. And then, knock. Passenger side window. Not frantic, not angry, just confident. Like it knew I was there. Like it had always known. 30 seconds later, knock. Roof vent. I could hear the dust raining down through the fan blades, the faint tick of sand hitting plastic, and then silence. I waited. 1 minute, 2. My fingers clenched the wrench so hard I could feel the metal biting into my skin. And then the 3rd knock. Not on the door, not on the window. It came from inside, right behind me. I turned slowly, and there, standing in the narrow hallway between the bunks, was Marcus. But it wasn't Marcus. His face was slack, his skin too pale, his eyes gone. Just hollow sockets staring right through me. He opened his mouth, and instead of words, a thin stream of black sand poured out, spilling down his chin onto the floor. Then the mouth stretched wider, too wide. And I realized it wasn't a mouth anymore. It was a doorway, and something was inside it, crawling forward. I screamed and threw the wrench, but it passed right through him. He didn't flinch, didn't react, just kept standing there, so that mouth open, sand pouring. And then the power died. All of it. The lights, the clock, even the emergency exit light above the cab. Everything went black. For a second, there was just the sound of wind, no breathing around me. Cold air rushed against my neck like something was sniffing the back of my skull. And then the whisper returned, closer than ever, right in my ear. You stayed. That was all it said. I don't remember what happened next. I think I passed out. I woke up the next morning in the driver's seat, sunlight burning through the windshield, my clothes stiff with sweat and dirt. The entire RV was untouched. No sand, no handprints, no Marcus. But the strangest part, the clock on the stove read 2:17 a.m. It was stuck there, permanently. I turned the ignition. The RV started like nothing had happened. I drove. I didn't pack. I didn't clean. I just drove out of the valley, away from the place. I didn't stop until I reached a gas station 200 miles west, near the edge of California. It was midday. Bright. Normal. And the attendant smiled like nothing in the world could ever be wrong. I asked if they'd seen anyone matching Marcus's description I'm through in the past few days. They said no. I showed them his photo. They looked confused. "I've seen you before," the attendant said instead. "Last week, I think. You were alone." That shook something in me, because I knew Marcus had been there. I knew he was real. Wasn't he? I left without saying another word. That night, I stayed in a motel, curtains drawn, TV on, lights never off. I didn't sleep, but at least I wasn't in the RV. But at 2:17 a.m., the television cut out, and I heard a knock. Just one, coming from inside the wall. I left before sunrise. I don't camp anymore. I sold the RV a few weeks later. Told myself it was the smart thing to do, but sometimes I still see it. That same rig, parked across the street, sitting at a rest stop, idling at a gas station just off the highway. Same plates, same rusted bike rack. No one ever gets out of it. But sometimes I swear I see someone sitting in the driver's seat, waiting, and once, just once, when I walked too close, I swear it knocked. Now I don't park anywhere for too long. I keep moving. And every night, no matter where I am, I check the clock when it hits 2:16. And I whisper to whatever's listening, "Not tonight. You already took what you came for." But deep down, I know it's never finished. It's still out there, waiting in the dark corners of places we were never meant to settle, watching from inside the heat shimmer, measuring us. And one night, when I finally stop running, it'll knock again. And this time, I might answer. It's hard to explain how quiet it gets out there in the dead of winter. Not just a lack of sound, but a full absence, like the world is holding its breath. I used to crave that silence, thought it meant peace. Escape. That was before I learned that sometimes silence isn't peace at all. It's warning. The kind of warning nature gives you when it wants you gone. My name's Eli, 41, divorced, full-time RVer for the past 3 years. I started winter camping out of necessity, couldn't afford to chase the sun every year like some of the other guys do. But pretty quickly, I fell in love with it. The empty campgrounds, the stillness, the way snow muffled everything and made even the sketchiest backwoods feel like a cathedral. But I don't romanticize it anymore. The thing that happened last December, just north of Gunnison, Colorado, changed how I look at cold solitude and what hides under both. I'd been parked in the same spot for a couple of days, a small Bureau of Land Management pull-off surrounded by lodgepole pine. No hookups, but it had decent cell reception if I pointed my hotspot toward the West Ridge. The kind of place no one really goes that time of year. Too remote, too exposed. That's what I liked about it. The nights were dropping below zero, but my rig was set up for it. Heated tanks, good insulation. I'd done this a dozen times before. I knew how to stay safe, or I thought I did. The first night was normal. Clear sky, crisp air, stars like frost clinging to black glass. I watched a movie on my laptop, ate canned chili, and fell asleep with the furnace humming soft and low. No problems. It was the second night when things started to feel off. It began with a strange tapping, subtle, inconsistent. I was half asleep when I first heard it, around 2 a.m. Thought it was just ice shifting on the roof. Normal. But the sound didn't behave like ice. It moved, started over the cab, then shifted toward the kitchen, then near the rear window by my bed, like something was pacing along the roofline of the RV, tapping, sliding, waiting. I lay there for a while, trying to rationalize it. Branches, icicles, maybe a squirrel. I'd seen them scurry up snowbanks before, but that didn't sit right. The rhythm was too slow, too deliberate, and there were no overhanging trees, nothing close enough for a branch to reach. Still, I told myself not to panic. Got up, put on boots, stepped outside with my headlamp. Nothing. Just frozen ground and a wall of black trees. No tracks on the snow-covered roof, no broken branches, no signs of life, human or animal. I chalked it up to nerves, went back inside and made some tea. Told myself I'd been alone too long, that the silence was getting to me. But it didn't stop there. The next morning, I found something strange about 20 feet from my rig. At first, I thought it was just a snowdrift, but as I got closer, I realized it was a pile. A neat, intentional stack of bones. Small ones, rabbits, maybe. Birds, all stripped clean. Arranged like a cairn right in the middle of the pull-off where no animal would have bothered. It wasn't there the day before. I stood over it for a long time, feeling the air go still around me. The trees didn't move. The clouds hung heavy but still, like everything was watching. I told myself it had to be some backwoods hunter, some bushcrafter playing games, but the area had been empty for days. My tire tracks were still the only ones leading in off the Forest Service road. I checked twice. That's when the unease set in, that quiet warning in the gut. The one you try to reason away, but it just keeps scratching. Still, I didn't leave. That was my first mistake. Winter teaches you pride real quick. You tell yourself you're tougher than the cold, smarter than the isolation. You become proud of surviving places no one else dares to go. I made chili again that night. Ate it slowly while watching the snow thicken outside the window. I tried to ignore the way the trees seemed closer than before. Tried not to watch for movement between them. The wind picked up around midnight. Nothing extreme, but enough to make the rig creak. And then came the knocking. Not tapping this time, not shifting, knocking. 3 slow, hollow thuds on the rear wall. It stopped my breath cold. I shut off the lights and crouched by the kitchen window. Couldn't see anything through the frost. Couldn't hear anything but the wind dragging across the snow like sandpaper. Then, another knock. This time at the side door. Just 2 feet from where I sat. No footsteps. No voices. Just the knock. 3 beats, just like before. I didn't move for hours, didn't sleep, didn't breathe more than I had to. When dawn finally crept in through the ice-rimmed windows, I opened the door slowly, cautiously. Nothing. No footprints. No signs of a person or animal. The snow was undisturbed except for my own boot prints from the night before. But I knew what I'd heard. I told myself I had 2 choices, pack up and leave, or stay and get answers. I stayed. That was my second mistake. The next night, the knocking didn't come, but the quiet felt louder, heavier, like something was holding its breath just outside the walls. I kept the lights off, sat in the dark with a knife on the table and a flashlight in my hand. At 3:07 a.m., the furnace died. No warning, no sputter, just silence. I climbed down into the storage compartment, checked the propane, the lines, the battery. Everything was fine. Everything should have worked, but it didn't. The temperature dropped fast, below 0. I turned on the generator. Nothing. Dead. It felt deliberate, like something wanted me cold, isolated, vulnerable. I bundled in every blanket I had, still shivering, still waiting, and then, just before first light, something walked around the RV. Not ran, not crept, walked, heavy steps, measured, crunch, 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 right outside, right past the windows, right past my breath fogging the glass. I didn't move, couldn't. And when I finally got the courage to look outside again, there were no prints, none, just smooth snow where the footsteps should have been. I started the RV the second the sun hit the treetops. I didn't pack up properly, didn't care. I drove south, didn't stop for hours, didn't speak, didn't look back. But the cold followed, and I wasn't alone in that cab. I didn't notice it at first. That's the funny thing about fear. It doesn't just leave. It seeps into everything. Makes you question shadows where there aren't any, silence where there should be sound. I made it all the way down past Montrose before the warmth of the sun started reaching inside the RV. I remember pulling over at a gas station, half frozen, hands stiff on the wheel. I went inside to grab coffee and stood there in that blinding fluorescent light like I'd just returned from war. People were laughing, buying snacks. A kid in a Broncos hoodie was playing on a claw machine. The normalcy of it made me dizzy. I didn't talk to anyone, just paid and left. Found a KOA on the edge of town, open year-round with hookups and company and cameras. I parked in a visible spot right by the main office, hooked up power, cranked the furnace. For the first time in 3 nights, I felt like maybe I could breathe again, but that night, I still didn't sleep because something wasn't right in the RV. Not wrong in a mechanical way, not broken, wrong in a quiet, heavy way, like the air inside had changed somehow. Heavier, stiller, and there was a smell, not strong, not obvious, but there, lingering. Metallic, maybe, or sweet in a rotten kind of way, like meat that had been frozen too long and then left to thaw in the sun. I tore the rig apart looking for the source, checked every cabinet, every drawer, thought maybe something had spilled or spoiled, but I couldn't find anything. Just that faint, sour presence hanging in the air, growing thicker by the hour. The next morning, I found something on the dash. At first, I thought it was frost, but it wasn't cold to the touch. It was ice. A small smear of it, right there on the inside of the windshield, like something had breathed against the glass and left part of itself behind. I stared at it for a long time. Then I wiped it away. But it came back, the next night and the night after that, always in the same place. Always around 2 a.m. I tried to convince myself it was a seal leak, some kind of condensation issue, but deep down I knew it wasn't. Because on the 4th night after I'd driven all the way to Durango, the ice came back again. Only this time there were fingerprints in it. 3 long streaks, like something with too many knuckles had pressed its hand against the glass from the inside. I left the next morning without showering. Didn't eat, didn't even fill up on gas. Just drove and drove and drove, all the way into New Mexico. Found a state park open through winter. Electric hookups, rangers, even other campers. Normal, safe. That night, I locked every door, pulled every shade, slept with the lights on, but still, just after 3 a.m., I woke up to the sound of my propane detector chirping. I sat up, heart pounding. Beep, pause, beep, that shrill mechanical whine, like it was trying to tell me something more than just gas levels. I jumped up, checked the control panel. Everything was green. No propane leak, no issue with the batteries, just that chirping, echoing, mocking. I shut it off manually, but when I turned around, the inside of the windshield was fogged again. Thick this time, dense, and in it, not just prints, a message. Written in the condensation, 3 words. Still with you. I froze. Just stood there in that tiny humming space, unable to make my limbs move. Then something shifted. No sound, no movement, just pressure, like the air had suddenly doubled in weight and I could feel it, something in the rig with me, not visible, not tangible, but present, watching, breathing, feeding. I bolted, threw open the door, barefoot and shirtless into the freezing dark. Ran across the gravel lot toward the bathhouse, heart jackhammering in my chest. I must have looked insane. A guy in pajama pants sprinting through the snow like something was chasing him. I spent the rest of that night huddled on the bench outside the ranger station, wrapped in an emergency blanket. Didn't matter that no one saw anything. Didn't matter that the rig was empty when they searched it in the morning, because I knew. Whatever I'd encountered back in those woods near Gunnison, it hadn't stayed behind. It had followed me, attached itself. To me, to the RV, I didn't know. But I had to do something. I made a decision that morning, one I never thought I'd make. I drove to a dealership in Albuquerque, traded in the RV on the spot, took a loss so deep it made my throat ache. Didn't matter. I didn't want it anymore. I bought a used SUV and a tent, went back to basics, back to the dirt, back to the kind of camping that doesn't come with walls for something to hide behind. I stayed in state parks, national forests, anywhere that felt open, exposed, where I could see the sky, but I never winter camped again. Not once, because winter isn't empty. It just hides things better. The snow buries what the trees can't. The silence isn't peace, it's a blindfold. And sometimes, when it gets really, really cold, you're not the only thing awake. It's been almost 2 years now, and I still haven't figured out what followed me out of those woods. Sometimes I think it was something spiritual, some cursed energy in that frozen valley that latched on the moment I doubted myself. Other times I think it was psychological. A break, maybe. Too many days alone, too many miles driven through the quiet until my mind started filling in the blanks. But those thoughts only last until nightfall. Because something changed in me after that trip. Something fundamental. Before Gunnison, I was the kind of camper who loved the solitude. I'd find the emptiest site, park as far away from others as I could, and listen to the silence like it was a song. Now, I park near people. I scan the tree line. I double-check the door locks before I even unhook shore power. And even with a new vehicle, even in the most well-lit, well-trafficked, safest campgrounds, I still feel it sometimes, that presence. Not loud, not obvious, but there, in the corner of my eye, in the whisper of wind against aluminum siding, in the faintest echo that doesn't quite line up with my steps. It's quieter now. Faded, maybe. Like whatever followed me started to lose its grip the farther I got from those frozen mountains. But it's not gone. I know that. There was one night, months later, camped in the Arizona desert. Warm air, clear skies, cactus silhouettes against the stars. I'd finally started to breathe again, finally started to believe it was all behind me. Then just after midnight, I woke up in the tent to the sound of something brushing against the nylon. Not footsteps, not wind. A slow, dragging motion, like a fingertip. Circling. I didn't move. I just listened. And then 3 slow taps, right behind my head, like knuckles against bone. And when I sat up and turned around, when I zipped open the flap and stepped into the desert cold, there was no one there. But on the tent fabric, I found 3 faint smudges. Dark, greasy, finger length. It wasn't over. Whatever it was, it had learned to wait, to drift, to test me. And that's when I realized something I hadn't dared to admit before. This wasn't about a haunted RV. It wasn't about some cursed place in Colorado. This was about me. What I'd brought into that valley, what I'd ignored, what I'd let in. You see, the real danger of winter RV camping isn't just the cold or the roads or the mechanical failures. It's the way winter makes everything still. So still that the things inside you, the doubts, the regrets, the shadows you keep tucked away start rising up, filling the silence, whispering back. And if you're not ready for that, if you haven't made peace with the darker parts of yourself, winter will show them to you, magnified, personified. I think that's what I met out there. Not a ghost, not a demon, a reflection of the part of me that didn't believe I could survive on my own, the part that never really forgave myself for the choices I made back in Oregon, the years I spent working a job that chewed me up, the marriage I watched fall apart while I sat silent. That part of me found its voice in the woods, and it followed me home. That's what I believe now. But belief doesn't make it easier, because fear doesn't live in the facts, it lives in the waiting. In the moments before dawn, when the air shifts and your breath catches and you're not sure if you heard something or imagined it, it lives in the way snow absorbs sound until you can't even hear your own footsteps. It lives in condensation messages on your windshield, in the sharp stink of something dead when nothing is around, in the cold that lingers too long after you've come back inside. And worst of all, it lives in the fact that no one believes you. I've told this story to a few people, fellow RVers, park hosts, one guy who said he used to live out of his Sprinter and knew that kind of fear. Most people just nod, smile like they're being polite, and then they stop texting back. Because it sounds crazy, and maybe it is. But if you've ever winter camped alone, way out there, really alone, you know what I'm talking about. That sense that something ancient is watching, that the forest has eyes, that the snow is keeping secrets, that the silence isn't empty, it's listening. And if you stay long enough, it starts to respond. That's what happened to me, and I'll never forget it. I didn't go back to Colorado that winter. I didn't go back the next winter either, but I kept camping. Because even after everything, after the cold, after the sounds, after the moment I wasn't sure I'd make it back, I still loved the road. That's the strange part. It didn't ruin camping for me. It redefined it. I started seeing it differently, not just as an escape from the world, but as an immersion into myself, into everything I was trying not to face. Winter does that to you. It peels back the layers, strips everything down to the essentials. You learn quick what matters when the heater dies at 3 a.m. and the windows are covered in ice, and you're digging through a bin for one more thermal layer because your fingers don't move right anymore. You learn what you're really afraid of when something scratches the side of your rig and you're too scared to look, but even more scared not to. You learn what you're capable of when you have no other choice. But I also learned something else. That fear doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're awake. That's what I carry with me now. That awareness. Because danger isn't always a monster in the woods. It's the carbon monoxide leak you don't smell. It's the iced over vent you forgot to check. It's the snow piling up around your exhaust while you're asleep. It's complacency. That's what almost got me killed. Not some ghost, not some phantom in the trees. It was me, letting my guard down, getting too comfortable, trusting the cold not to take me. And I think that's the real point of all this. That winter camping teaches you that survival is an active process. It's not just something that happens because you're lucky or experienced or prepared. It's something you do. You survive minute by minute, by staying sharp, by listening to your instincts, by acknowledging the voice that says, this doesn't feel right, even when you can't explain why. Especially when you can't explain why. That voice, that's what saved me. It was barely a whisper at first, when the wind changed, when the smell hit, when the forest went quiet. But it got louder, and eventually it said, leave. So I did. And maybe that's what saved my life. Or maybe it was just the beginning. I've thought a lot about that night, about what would have happened if I'd ignored it, if I'd stayed another night, if I'd gone outside when the voice called out, if I'd opened the door when I saw the figure watching from the trees. I still don't know what it wanted, but I do know this. There are places in this country, hidden, wild places, where something lingers, something ancient, something patient. And in winter, those places come alive. The cold slows everything down, keeps people away, muffles sound, dulls instincts, hides footprints. It's the perfect season for something that doesn't want to be seen. I believe that now. I've read stories since about other campers, other RVers, people who vanished without a trace, people found dead in rigs with no mechanical issues, no foul play, just gone. Sometimes I wonder if they camped where I did, if they heard the knocking too, if they ignored the signs one night too long. It's not the kind of thing you bring up around a campfire, but it's real. And maybe that's the final lesson winter gave me, that not all danger announces itself. Sometimes it waits, watches, moves slow through the trees and ice, and if you let it, it'll creep inside, into your rig, into your mind, into your decisions, until one night, it's too late. That's why I still camp, why I still travel, because I want to remember, I want to stay alert, I want to feel that pulse of adrenaline when the wind knocks against the side of the rig, when the heater groans like something breathing, when the frost creeps in and coats the windows like a veil, because every sound, every shadow, every cold breath, it's a reminder. I made it through, but not untouched. I don't tell many people the whole story, not because I'm ashamed, but because once you say certain things out loud, once you give them shape, they get harder to forget. And this story, it never really left me. Not when I drove back across Kansas under pale gray skies. Not when I parked in Arizona and tried to sweat the frost out of my bones. Not when I laid awake in the desert, listening for the quiet between the wind. I stopped using propane heat after that trip, switched everything to electric when I could. It's not always practical, but I'll take inconvenience over guessing what I'm breathing in. I installed carbon monoxide detectors in 3 different places, one in the back, one by the heater, and one by the bed. I learned to clear the exhaust vents twice a day in snow, but even with all that, there's something you can't prepare for. The feeling. The dread that rolls in before the cold even hits, the way your body knows before your mind catches up. That winter rewired something in me. I'm not trying to scare you. I want you to camp. I want you to explore. I want you to stand outside in the morning while the frost lifts and the pine trees glow gold in the sun. But I also want you to respect what you're walking into. Because winter doesn't care about your itinerary. It doesn't care that you've camped for 20 years without incident. It doesn't care how much your rig cost or how many watts your solar system pushes. Winter strips away all that comfort and shows you what you really rely on. And when you're alone, you start to see the small things differently. You notice how long the shadows get around 4 p.m., how quickly the warmth disappears when the sun dips behind a ridge, how even your own breath starts to feel foreign, fogging up the glass, reminding you that you're still alive, but only barely. That's what happened to me outside Pagosa Springs. It wasn't some dramatic encounter with death. It was slower than that. A quiet unraveling. One vent iced over, one battery failing, one bad call to stay another night because I didn't want to look like I was giving up. That's what almost did it. Pride. And that's what a lot of winter camping boils down to. Humility. You have to be humble out here, or the cold will teach you to be. Because once things start going wrong, they snowball. Literally. A storm comes in faster than the forecast said. The heater draws more power than expected. The snow piles up higher than you thought it would. Suddenly, you're not boondocking anymore. You're stranded. And you realize all the gadgets in the world can't replace common sense. So here's what I do now. I keep an exit plan. Always. I camp within reach of main roads, not tucked away in some gorgeous, treacherous dreamscape. I bring redundancies. 2 ways to heat, 2 ways to cook, 2 ways to get help. I let people know exactly where I'm going and when I expect to be back. And I trust my instincts, even when they make no sense. Even when they tell me to leave a place that seems perfect, just because it feels wrong. That gut feeling, it saved me more times than I can count, and I know now more than ever that it's earned its place. Because something was out there that night. I still remember the smell, like wet dirt and burning plastic. It didn't belong to the woods, or to me, or to any animal I've ever known, and the sound, that low, scraping hum that came in waves, not constant, almost curious. It moved around the RV like it was circling, not fast but deliberate. And I remember sitting there, with every light off, holding a hatchet I knew wouldn't do anything if it really came to it, and thinking, you waited too long to leave. I still don't know why I made it out. Maybe it got bored. Maybe it was never dangerous in the first place. Maybe it just wanted to see if I'd notice it. Or maybe it was testing me, waiting to see if I'd break. Because fear does that. It presses, pokes, whispers things that sound like truth. It's not that cold yet, you're just tired. That noise was the wind, that smells from the fridge. Don't be stupid, don't be weak. But the cold doesn't lie, neither does your gut, and neither do the scars that some trips leave behind. I didn't tell anyone what happened until weeks later. Even then, I only told Jacob, and I left out most of it. Said the heater acted up. Said I felt lightheaded and panicked. Left out the circling. Left out the sound. Left out the thing that stood still behind the tree line for 2 hours, just far enough away that I could convince myself it was nothing. I left it out because I didn't want to admit that I froze, not from the cold, but from fear. The kind of fear that strips the rationality out of you and replaces it with shame. Because the truth is, I didn't move. I didn't get out. I didn't drive away when I should have. I stayed in that RV like it was safer than outside, even when every fiber in me screamed otherwise. And I think that's the part people don't understand. It's not always a fight or flight moment. Sometimes it's freeze. Sometimes it's lie still and pray the thing doesn't come closer. Sometimes it's silence because speaking might make it real. When I finally left the next morning, white-knuckled, hands shaking, back drenched in sweat beneath 3 layers, I didn't even look back. I didn't want to know if there were prints in the snow. I didn't want to confirm what I already knew in my gut. Because if I saw tracks circling the rig, or worse, if I saw none at all, I might not have come back to the mountains at all. But eventually, I did. After a few months, I waited until the snow and the wind changed, and then I eased my way back in, first in campgrounds, then on the edges of forest roads, then finally deep in the backcountry again. Because I couldn't let that fear own me, but I learned from it. And I did. Here's what I learned in no uncertain terms. 1. Winter is not the same thing as summer with snow. It's a different beast, one that's less forgiving, more deceptive, and far more isolating. 2. Your body lies to you in the cold. You can be dangerously close to hypothermia and still feel fine. You can convince yourself the air's breathable when it isn't. 3. Carbon monoxide is invisible until it's too late. Install more detectors than you think you need. Test them often. Replace the batteries before every trip. 4. Insulation can trap in what it shouldn't. That warmth might come with a price. Know your venting. Know where your exhausts go. Keep them clear. Check them every single day. 5. Don't ignore your instincts. That tug in your chest, that weird silence outside, that smell you can't quite place. Don't brush it off. Trust it. It's that. And the last thing I learned, maybe the hardest lesson of all, you're not the only thing out there. Now, I don't mean that in some cryptid hunting, ghost chasing kind of way. I mean, there are patterns in the wilderness, things that repeat, sounds that aren't random, stillness that isn't empty. I've camped all over this country. I've heard coyotes mimic baby cries. I've seen mountain lions walk like shadows between trees. I've heard the trees themselves creak and pop like bones breaking in the cold. But that night in Colorado, what I heard wasn't animal. And it wasn't nature. It noticed me. And it waited. And that terrifies me more than anything. Because if something could sit just beyond the reach of light in the middle of a storm without making a sound for hours, what else could it do? What has it done to others who didn't have the luck to wake up in time? Sometimes I wonder if the people who go missing in winter, those who just wandered off, were pulled by something they didn't understand. Or maybe they felt what I felt, and they didn't listen fast enough. I think about that when I look at the photographs I took the morning after. The icicles that hung like knives from the edge of the awning. The strange, sweeping marks in the snow by the edge of the tree line. Long and curved, almost like drag marks, but no boot prints beside them. I didn't see those until I was going through my phone weeks later. I zoomed in, I brightened the exposure, and then I stopped looking, deleted the photo. Some things aren't worth keeping, but the lesson that I kept, I always keep that. I didn't go back to that specific spot for nearly a year. When I finally did, it was summer, warm, bright, full of hikers and hummingbirds, and dust kicked up by trail runners. The whole place looked smaller somehow, less like a trap, more like a postcard. But the tree line was the same. So was the silence just under the bird song, the kind that presses in when no one's looking. I parked farther down the road that time, stayed in a developed campsite, even though it was crowded and noisy and not even close to level. I didn't care. I didn't want to be alone out there again. Because something shifted in me after that night. Before, I chased the solitude. I loved being out in the blankness of snow-covered wilderness where the only sound was the wind over the roof and the creak of ice against bark. It made me feel small in a good way, like I belonged to something bigger. But now I understood that solitude had edges, and sometimes something sharp waited at those edges, just out of sight. It's not that I stopped RV camping in the winter. I didn't, but I changed the way I approached it. I triple-check my seals now. I run carbon monoxide tests twice a day. I pack backup batteries for my detectors and bring 2 backup heaters in case one fails. I even keep a handheld anemometer to track wind chill in case my sensors misread. Paranoid? Maybe. But paranoia is just risk awareness after you've already survived something. I also keep an emergency exit plan now. Always. Where's the nearest plowed road? Which direction would I walk if the rig failed? How many miles to cell service? How long would it take to hike out? even in a storm? Those are questions you should always have answers to. Winter doesn't give second chances, not out here. It barely gives warnings. It just takes. But it gives something too, if you're lucky enough to walk away. It gives you clarity. The cold is clarifying in a way most people never understand. It strips things down. What matters, what doesn't. Who you are when it's just you and the dark and the snow pressing against the glass. I've sat in that silence for hours since then, purposefully, testing myself, facing it. But I've never heard that whistle again. And God help me, I hope I never do. You know what else I never heard again? The click of that outside latch sliding shut. It was too specific, too close. I'll never convince myself it was just wind. I replaced the locks after that trip, upgraded them, reinforced the doors, not because I think someone's coming in, but because I need to feel like I'm doing something, like I'm not helpless against whatever walks the tree lines at night. Because that's the truth of winter RV camping nobody wants to say out loud. You can do everything right, and still something can go wrong. You can be prepared, smart, experienced. You can have weathered worse storms, driven through whiteouts, patched leaks in 10 degrees, and kept water lines from freezing in the heart of a blizzard. But one night, just one night, where something you didn't plan for shows up, that's all it takes. And no manual, no checklist, no top 10 winter RV safety tips will save you if you ignore your gut. That's why I tell this story, not to scare you off winter RVing. Hell no. Winter is still my favorite season to camp. The way the snow hushes the world, the sharpness of the stars above the frozen tree line, the way a steaming cup of coffee tastes 10 times better when the world outside is icebound. But it's not a game. The danger is real, and it's not always the storm you see coming. Sometimes it's what stands behind the trees when you think no one knows you're there. Sometimes it's what waits for you to fall asleep right as your heater starts blowing poison. Sometimes it's the part of you that whispers, "Don't open the door." And sometimes it's the part that whispers back. I didn't talk about it for a long time. Not to my friends, not to other campers online, not even to the guy at the RV repair place who asked why I needed a full overhaul of my propane system and door hardware. I told him I wanted peace of mind. What I didn't say was that I hadn't slept a full night in the RV since it happened, that I kept waking up at 2:17 a.m. sharp, same time the latch had clicked, and staring at the door, heart thudding like a slow drum. It didn't matter where I was. Whether I was camped near Lake Tahoe in southern Utah, even parked at a relative's driveway in Arizona, if I was sleeping in the rig, that time would find me. It was like something had burned itself into the memory of my walls, into the steel of my frame. A ghost in the bolts. I kept trying to rationalize it. Could have been a hallucination. Carbon monoxide poisoning can do that. Dream logic, maybe. Auditory pareidolia. But if it was just my mind, why was the latch actually unlatched the next morning? Why were my CO levels normal when I checked them with 2 different devices hours later? Why did I smell snow melt and decaying pine inside my sealed RV? I started digging into local lore, too. The town near that campsite was small, tucked into the mountain pass like it'd been dropped there and forgotten. 1 post office, 1 gas station, and a bar with a closed for winter sign that looked permanent. But the library was open. Barely. Old woman at the desk gave me a wary look when I asked if there had been any strange incidents up the mountain. I expected her to dismiss me, to say no or ask what I meant, but she didn't. She just sighed. "You camp up there alone?" she asked. I nodded. She didn't ask what happened. She didn't want to know. Or maybe she already did. "Mountain doesn't like that. Not in winter." That was all she said. That, and there's things that don't move when it's warm, but they do when it's cold. Don't ask me what. Just don't go back alone. That night, I stayed at a Motel 6, first time I'd done that in years. I sat on the lumpy bed listening to the buzz of the heater, and I thought about how thin the line really is between safety and danger, between thinking you're in control and realizing you never were. Because that's the hardest thing to admit about RV life, especially solo, especially winter. You don't have walls like a house. You don't have neighbors on the other side of that drywall. You've got aluminum, maybe fiberglass, a couple inches between you and whatever's outside. And winter makes everything sharper, louder, more present. A branch brushing your slide out sounds like a whisper. A gust of wind can sound like a voice. The pop of contracting metal as the sun goes down can make your heart leap if you're already on edge. The cold amplifies everything, including your fear. And the biggest mistake people make, myself included, is assuming that if they're experienced, they're immune. You're not. You never are. I used to think the worst case scenario was breaking down in a blizzard or losing heat in the middle of the night with no cell service. Now I know it's this: realizing something found you in the woods, something you didn't invite, didn't plan for, and can't explain away, and realizing it might not have left. The worst part, I started to wonder if it had followed me. Not literally, not something dragging footprints through the snow across half the country, but something quieter, something psychological, a crack that hadn't been there before, an opening. After that winter, I noticed things, little changes. I'd hear tapping sounds on the walls in the middle of the night, not during storms, on still, silent nights when even the coyotes weren't moving. Once I got out and circled the rig with a flashlight, nothing. No branches nearby, no animals, just those taps, evenly spaced like a metronome. Right around 2:17 a.m. Another time, I found frost patterns on the inside of the windshield. Perfect spirals, like someone had pressed their hand there and dragged a finger in slow circles. I kept a journal then. I didn't even tell my family. Just documented it, trying to convince myself I wasn't losing my grip, that I wasn't haunted. Not in the Hollywood sense, but in the way trauma haunts you. Creeps into your gear bags, sits in the driver's seat while you sleep. I thought about selling the RV. A couple times I even got as far as drafting the listing. Fully winterized, excellent condition, off-grid capable. But then I'd remember the silence of the woods on those perfect mornings, snow glittering on the trees, coffee steaming in a chipped enamel mug, and I couldn't do it. Because here's the thing about RV life, it teaches you to live close to fear without running from it. And there's something beautiful in that. If you've camped in the deep winter, you know what I mean. You know how everything feels closer. Your thoughts, your breath, the edge of the world. You don't get to pretend. You're either ready or you're not. Nature doesn't coddle you out here. I kept going. I kept camping. I learned how to sit with that fear. Not ignore it, but listen to it. That's what saved me. That night in the mountains, the thing that almost killed me wasn't the carbon monoxide or the storm or whatever moved past my window. It was my hesitation. My instinct told me something was off, and I waited. I rationalized, I second-guessed. That's the real danger of winter camping. Not just the cold, not just the dark. It's the silence inside you when your survival instinct tries to speak and you don't listen. Now, I listen. Every time. It's been 3 years since that night. 3 winters, each one colder than the last. But I've gone back out every season, not to the same campsite. I've never stepped foot near that mountain again, but to others. All over the country. Idaho, northern Arizona, the Cascades. I even tried a stretch of backcountry camping up in Montana, where the snow comes down like ash and the quiet feels almost holy. I've rebuilt my systems, triple-checked everything, added layers of safety. I keep backup batteries, a hardwired CO detector, even a thermal camera now. Not because I'm paranoid, but because I know what it feels like to wish I'd had 5 more minutes of warning. But even with all of that, there's still a moment. Every winter. Usually my first night back out in the real cold. I'll be lying in bed, the heat purring low, the walls creaking gently as they adjust to the freeze. And I'll look at that door, the same one that clicked open by itself. And for a few seconds, I'll wonder if I made the whole thing up. If it was just exhaustion, a bad dream, some tangled nerve in my brain firing wrong. But then I'll remember the frost spiral on the windshield, the bruises on my ribs, the way my voice sounded when I screamed for help into nothing got only stillness in return. And I'll remember the quiet that came after. Not peace, not exactly, but awareness, respect, fear that sharpens you instead of breaking you. That's the thing I try to tell new campers now when they ask about wintering in an RV. They ask about tires and antifreeze and heating options. I answer them, of course. But then I add this: winter doesn't care how prepared you think you are. It doesn't care if your rig is top of the line or if you've got 10,000 Instagram followers documenting your cozy cabin life on wheels. What it does care about is silence, isolation, complacency. It will find the moment you let your guard down and press into it. And if you're lucky, all you'll get is a scare, a reminder. But if you're not, if you ignore the little signs, the creaks and shifts and clicks and instincts that tell you something's not right, you might not wake up. Or worse, you might wake up to something you can't explain, something you can't ever shake. I still camp in the snow. I still chase those perfect mornings, the ones where the trees are frosted like sugar and the sky turns lavender before dawn. I still believe in the magic of it, because there is magic out here. But I also believe in the danger, and I believe in listening to it. So if you take anything from my story, let it be this: winter RV camping is not just beautiful. It's not just peaceful or quiet or aesthetic. It's a test of your attention, your instincts, and your respect for the forces that don't care how many checklists you've printed out. And when the storm hits, when the darkness presses against your windows and the cold feels alive and ancient, make sure you know who you are. Make sure you remember what you felt when you first stepped into that wild silence, because winter won't remind you twice.